Could I ask you to take your seats, please? Thank you. I have 7 o'clock. I'd like to call our meeting to order and ask you to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and thank you. We have a good crowd tonight, which is nice to see, and some special guests that I'll introduce when we get to the public comments section in just a moment. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. I have 2 announcements. One, the town is seeking a color photograph for the cover of the 2018 annual report. Photos can be submitted via email to epeterson@lunenburgonline.com, or you can call the Board of Selectmen office at 978-582-4144 for more information. Please submit a photo if you're interested by March 11th. Also, the town caucus is this coming Monday, March 11th at 7 p.m. at the Turkey Hill Elementary School. Anyone interested in running for elected office in the May 2019 elections should attend in order to seek the town caucus nomination. There are 2 open selectmen seats, among many other seats, on the May 2019 ballot. One is Barb Ebersol's position, and the other is the position that I now hold. Tonight I'm announcing that I will not be seeking a 3rd term as a selectman in May. It's been my honor and privilege to serve the citizens of Lunenburg for the last 6 years, and I thank you for your confidence and support during my tenure. I will, of course, continue to fulfill my obligations for the remainder of my current term and will serve until the May 18th election. Is there any other comment from the board?
Just want to start by thanking you for your service to the town and say that we're going to be losing a great asset, and I'm going to be losing a great friend sitting next to me. And to say that I'm going to miss you just doesn't cover it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for all you have contributed in your 6 years. You definitely will be missed. I have another, did you want to add anything?
No, thank you as well.
I have another comment. I was surprised to learn when watching the town manager's February 14th Finance Committee budget presentation that there are 2 new hires included in this year's preliminary budget. This is the first I have heard of either hire being on the town's wish list in my more than 4 years on the board. I am completely puzzled and practically fell on the floor when I was watching the meeting. During tonight's budget discussion, I look forward to hearing clear justification for an identification of all costs related to the proposed hiring of an assistant town manager and a part-time or full-time recreation director. I will certainly need to be convinced that such should be included in the budget. I'm just almost speechless.
Okay. I'd like to open it to public comments from the public. Kathy? Sure.
Hi, my name's Mike Clark, 275 Cross Road, and I come here tonight because one of our fellow town citizens had passed away in late December. He had done a lot of work on various boards in town. His name Lance May. He was also vice chair of our Lunenburg Republican Town Committee, which I chair. So we have Senator Dean Tran and State Committee woman Susan Smiley here that would like to present an adjournment and a letter from the governor to Lance's family.
Great. Senator Tran?
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Chairman, Town Administrator, members of the Board of Select. Thank you for having me here tonight with you. I'm here to celebrate the life of Lance Douglas May. He was I've known him for close to 20 years. He was not just a loving family man and committed husband and father to his family, but he also loved and committed to the town of Lunenburg. I can tell you that he was a walking bank of knowledge about the town. He knew everything about the town. And, I mentioned that his name was Lance Douglas May. It should have been Lance Lunenburg May. That's how much he loved the town of Lunenburg. And a few weeks ago, my colleagues in the Senate and I celebrated his life in the State Senate. And I'm here on the behalf of the Senate to present an adjournment to his family. And he was such a great asset to the town and a great loss. And I've known him for quite some time, and just want to say I'm very sorry, Donna, and the family. And would like to present this to you.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the town and all the community has come forth. Their love and their support. People I didn't even know lived in town. I just couldn't believe how many people have really come out. And it's really a testament to the great town that we do live in. Even though I wanted to get him out of this town. He wouldn't leave. So,
And
thank you again.
And I wanted to say thank you. Once you get involved in town government, which happened to me a couple years ago, you maybe sort of get trapped in it. And you come across people who have been there for so long, and whether they have a role or not, there's people who are threaded in who always know what's happening. And when I first started really digging in, through a mutual friend, Lance made a point to meet with me and sit down and see what I was all about and what are you doing and why are you getting involved, just out of his own interest, trying to, get a sense of who's this new person running around saying things. And so I really personally appreciate everybody who studies the government and the town so much. And so I spent a few hours one day just sitting and talking with him just about the town and what he knew and what he had done. And so for me, his level of understanding and dedication was very real because he made a point to meet and understand me personally. So thank you.
Thank you, and I think he did that to a lot of people. And, even though you may have been on one side or the other, he had a vision that he would give 100% to anyone who knew it, and I can attest that he did know an awful lot. and I have papers galore going back from, I think they belong in the Historical Society and not in my house. But that's what you end up doing. You end up going through all the pieces of paper that it occurs. And, again, thank you. And he was a great family man, and unfortunately you do understand it after, because I didn't think that he did much at the house. We always complain about our husband saying, thinking he's at meetings, but believe me, these last few months he really did an awful lot. And, just little things, calling the furnace man, and then you end up having to do it, or those types of issues that you come across.
And boy, he sure loved the high school sports.
Ooh,
The last time that he and I spent some time together, we walked around the town with the hockey team who just won the title, and he started telling me things back in the 70s, and I looked at him. I said, Lance, I couldn't remember what I ate yesterday. So that's how much he loved this town, and he was a great loss.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. And
Donna,
Susan?
I want to just keep you here. Good evening. Thank you again for having us here. this evening. Good evening. I'm Susan Smiley. I'm the Republican State Committee woman for the Worcester Middlesex District, and I would echo everything that the senator has said this evening. We're Matt this evening, but our sentiment is for him as well. And I'm here to deliver a citation from the governor and the lieutenant governor, who were dear friends of Lance May. And yeah, Lance gave a lot, and he took, you know, we all benefited from that, good, bad, or indifferent. And everything was in his heart to do the right thing. And so I just would like to read this nice citation from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to the family of Lance May. On behalf of the citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I am pleased to confer upon your family this governor's citation in recognition of Lance May's 48 years of dedicated service to the town of Lunenburg, including the Board of Selectmen, the Housing Authority, the Park Commission, the Cable Advisory Committee, and Cemetery Commission. Not to mention all the other athletic sports, as the senator mentioned. And this is issued from Governor Charlie Baker and Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito. So we love him, we miss him just as much as you guys do, and he's just tremendous friend and mentor, and he's the epitome of civic service, really. So
Thank you, Susan.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
So
That's great.
enjoy, and
Thank you, Ian, and thank you to the board.
you.
Taking
thank
some
you,
time
thank you
out
all.
today.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck, Jamie, wherever
Thank
you
you.
end up going. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Rogers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave Rogers, 82 Highland Street. I don't think it would be fitting if we didn't have a moment that we could laugh about with Lance, because for as long as I've known him, there were many, many funny situations. I just want to tell you about one. I had occasion to, this is years ago, more than 25, get some Red Sox tickets because they were playing with against the Yankees. So I called Lance and said, Lance, I got I have 4 tickets. I had them for 2 games, but I didn't tell him that. I have tickets for the Yankees, such and such a night. First thing out of his mouth, he says, "Are they free?" And I said, "Yeah, Lance, they are free. Yeah, as a matter of fact, and I'd like you to come as my guest." He said, "Oh boy, that'd be great." So I picked him up because he wouldn't drive, and we're heading for Boston, and we get down by the old Padula farm, and he's rumbling around and wrestling, and next thing I know, he's got a cigar and he's lighting it up. And I said, "Lance, I don't think it's going to be quite a good game for you tonight." He said, "Why not, Dave?" I said, "Because you're not going if you don't get rid of that cigar." So he was a good guy, had a lot of fun, and we certainly will miss him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment, please?
Kind of hate to follow Lance May. My name is Helen Obermeyer Simmons. I live at 323 Northfield Road. I've been a resident of Lunenburg for 20 years, and I'm an artist, former professor at Fitchburg State University. And so I read through the special event permit guidelines, and most of them seem all right to me. The only things that I had questions about were, for example, I know we have a lot of artists in town who might want to do an open studios. Jill Pottle has done them, I might want to do them. And it seems to me, would this kind of an open studio event fall under the requirement to have a special event permit if it's on private property? It's just a question I have. And second thing is, I think that you had in there something about it didn't affect events of less than 50 people, you know, and so certainly in open studios you might have people coming and going, but it seems to me no more than 50 people at not even at one time. And the other question I had was, at my property, I have homeowners insurance that will cover, people, visitors coming and everything. And so I'm wondering, again, it mentions something about getting special insurance for such an event, that would be difficult for me to provide individual insurance to insure it. The third thing I wondered about was, it mentions in here, and I'm sure many people have reviewed the special permit, is it does limit special events at any one property to 4. And so my question on that was, why 4? Why not 2? Why not 6? How did they come up with that number? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I have a question
Sure.
for you. What does an open studio look like?
What it means is, I have a home, I have an artist studio in the home. I actually have excellent parking in front of my home, enough for like 5 or 6 cars. And what it would be, I would publicize that it was an open studio. I would be in my studio with artwork on the walls. I'd be maybe demonstrating some watercolor collage techniques, something like that. And people would come in, number 1, to see my work, number 2, to possibly purchase some of my work, and number 3, artists always, people really like to see artists at work and to understand what the process is involved in making these creations. So that's what an open studios is. They have them, I know, they have them in Fitchburg. I know for specifically they had one that premiered last year. They have them up in the Monadnock region. Huh?
At the FAM? Do they have
No. This was a specific thing that it was organized through Tamar's Sitka West Gallery, and it was a brochure and everything, and they had open studio places, a couple at someone's private home in Fitchburg, and other at public places like, the churches, things like that. Yeah.
So how many people would visit an open
Well,
studio?
okay, we'll just use that as an example because it was well publicized. At any one time, there might have been at the most 10 people in any one venue, let's just say that, but there were a number of different venues, or at least, we'll say 6 venues, and so people would go from place to place to do that, to sort of like a round robin kind of a thing.
Sounds fun.
Yes, and so I do think that artists have it tough in marketing their work. And so one of the ways to do that is, as opposed to having a gallery representation, is to do an open studios.
Okay, well, thank you for explaining that.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there any other public comment? Please.
Thank you, Darren Massey, 300 Holman Street, Lunenburg. Thank you for your service. I'd just like to second what Helen has mentioned in my own capacity, but also Lunenburg Business Association. Open studios are a wonderful gift for residents to see what artists do, come to the homes. Talked a little bit about the Fitchburg artist open studio, but there's First Friday's events. There's various events we can do to promote the artists in town. One of them is the open studio. So again, I would request when you look at the special permit process to have some provision to pick a number to exclude events less than 20 people, 40 people, 50 people. I did see the 50 was excluded, so 50 people for an open studio, for garage sales, for the run-of-the-mill public events that people have at home so that they don't have to go through the special permitting process and the liability insurance and the host of terms that there are. So that would be my one suggestion to look at, to make that only for events over 50 people, let's say.
Yeah, I don't think there's any numbers in this, are there? I don't remember reading numbers. For events, but I don't remember number of people. I read it a few times. I didn't remember seeing that.
Correct.
see it?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I saw they were considering, I saw a line out.
Oh, okay.
Though I would request to place a number back in to make it only valid for over 50 people, over 40 people, whatever it is. Just so it doesn't catch the majority of low-key run-of-the-mill stuff.
Certainly not a garage sale.
Right, just let the garage sale go forth. Let the open studios go forth.
Except I don't want my husband to go to anymore.
Well, that's right. And then for the larger events, for myself, this makes sense. I always come here. I always ask for reasonable terms. So reasonable terms make sense. In my reading of it, perhaps I would suggest you look at putting in a caveat at the end to say that obviously every event is different. Maybe just at the end to say the Board of Selectmen have the option to waive any of the requirements based on a specific issue that comes up, just to build in some flexibility based on specifics. There's always going to be specificity. So rather than make it black or white, my request is to give yourselves the options. The 4 events per year, so be it, pick a number. 4 events, I might say 6 events if it were myself, a little bit higher for a year, calendar year. But overall, just, again, thank you for reasonable terms. Thank you for putting in the caveats. Thank you for making it public. And look forward to, reasonable conversation. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay. Our first agenda item this evening, or first item on the agenda, is a joint appointment with the Planning Board to fill a vacancy created by David Prokoview's resignation from the Planning Board. As of this time, we do not have any candidates, I believe, in the talent bank. We do encourage anyone who's interested in serving on the Planning Board to fill out a talent bank. Certainly, we would consider it an appointment until the next election. And then also, we'll be dealing tonight with the signing of a letter to the town clerk to ensure that all the open positions on the Planning Board are on the ballot for the May election as well. So we're not going to deal with that item this evening because we don't have anybody.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure.
In regards to doing an appointment, at this point with next Monday being town caucus, and I know that they need to have a full board of 4 to make certain votes, but would appointing ever really overlap with the natural process of somebody seeking the position through what's about to occur starting Monday?
I would like to say that I know that Paula Bertram, who's currently serving, is going in for surgery, so is going to be missing some meetings, so it's going to be 3. So if there was someone interested in filling in, I would think that would help them, especially because it's really...
It may, but by the time, like I know when I went for the appointment, it went through a period of a couple interviews, and I met with the planning board, and then I met with the Board of Selectmen. So if you really look at that length of time of vetting a person, and the fact that caucus is on Monday, I just wasn't sure if, just like we chose not to appoint somebody to fill Bob, if maybe we're so close to the election that we should let nature take its course.
Well, we do plan to put the position on the ballot. If there's someone that comes forward through the talent bank process, I think we'll have to discuss in open session with the planning board whether it makes any sense to appoint for the short term or not. The only reason being that there are some things, and I don't know the planning rules that well, but there are some things that if you don't act within a certain amount of time, they're approved kind of by default, and we want to make sure that if that comes into play, that if we possibly can, we have members of that are available to at least review any applications. I agree, and I think we'd all agree that from a common sense point of view, with the election this close, it probably makes most sense to advertise 3. I believe it'll be a total of 3 positions that'll be on the ballot, and encourage anyone who's interested in serving, go to the caucus campaign, get elected and serve for the full term or the remainder of whatever term they're filling. But I think we'd like to keep the option open if somebody is available and is going to run, and we could use them in the interim. I wouldn't want to close the door and say we can't make that appointment. Okay? Right?
To confirm, there will be 3 planning board positions on the caucus warrant.
Are they
Right.
for different lengths?
Yes.
How does that shake out?
5,
Yes.
3, and 2.
5, 3, and a 2.
So 5 is a full term, and 3 and 2 are to fulfill
Remainder of terms.
remaining terms. Okay. All right. Our next agenda item is to discuss the earth removal permit for PJ Keating. And basically, this is a continuation of a March, let's see. I don't know when the original public hearing was.
The original public hearing was back in August. It
Okay.
was continued to, I believe, January, then it was continued to February, and here we are today.
Right. And we have,
You should have seen a series of site plans submitted by PJ Keating. Again, Adam Burney, Land Use Director. Commissioner Rhodes sends his regards. I'm here in his stead tonight. So the quarry is the permit in question, and specifically permit number 14. But permit 14 is adjacent to both permits 18 and 42, so it covers kind of that whole corner of Fort Pond Road and Leominster Shirley Road. I know Commissioner Rhodes in the past has made his recommendation to you that at some point in the future those three permits be combined into a singular permit. I'm here tonight to echo that recommendation again, that tonight as a renewal or extension of permit 14, that the board cancel 18 and 42, or cancel all three and issue a new permit number. That's kind of, I guess, a matter of form for you, but tie them all in together, because the site plans that you were shown really cover all of those areas, and they were very in-depth and really showed a pretty clear picture of what exists out there and what's intended to exist out there. I don't know that there's a real idea of closure plan that can be formulated from it based on the length of time that they really intend to continue clearing rock. But the plans that were submitted were satisfactory. The commissioner and I reviewed them together, and his suggestion is that the board approve one holistic permit for that entire corner with a series of, I think it's 5 or 6 conditions. It's 5 conditions, and these are coordination of conditions from all 3 permits that were issued out there. Now, it's not every condition that was on there. Some of them don't make a lot of sense, like going below the road grade, because we're talking about digging 50 or 100 feet into the ground, and obviously that's below the road grade. So it would be renewing the permit as a singular permit, the keeping of a 100-foot natural buffer along Fort Pond Road and Leominster Shirley Road.
And that's what exists today?
Correct. It may actually be in excess of that, but it would be a minimum of the 100 feet.
If it's more than that, can't we just keep it at more than that?
But I think if you look at their plans, there's some areas where they intend to do some work to within 100 feet. I don't have the plans right in front of me, but if it's more than 100 feet, it's not measurably more. It's not like it's 300 feet. It's maybe 120 feet.
I would think the more buffer you could get, the better off we'd be.
Well, and I understand that point. The abutters on the opposite side of Fort Pond Road are the Keating Corporation. So essentially what you're trying to do is buffer dust and potential mitigate anything that might interfere with the roadway. And I think 100 feet is well within the parameters of what you would want to see for that. There aren't residential abutters along that section of the road.
Yeah, but you drive by it.
And
I don't want to be
and
peering into it.
When you're 100 feet, you're not going to peer into it because the land does go up a little bit and come back down. So there's a natural berm as well as the greenery. And again, these are simply recommendations. The board is open and willing to alter whatever they feel is appropriate. The third would be reasonable effort to curtail noise and dust, orderly flow of traffic. Again, you should have this document in there, so I'm not going to read it verbatim, just in the interest of time and good television. Then the permit does allow for Keating to cross the road with its stone haulers, which are unregistered vehicles and has for over 60 years now. There's no proposal to end that, but to add a series of conditions that, again, reflect a lot of what's within the other permits. That the vehicle should be covered with general liability, that Keating would assume all sole responsibility for public safety and the operations on the town roads. They would assume responsibility for the repair of these roads as it relates to degradation, specifically related to their operations. It's very clear where they cross the road, and if there were demonstrable wear and tear on the road as in opposed to other areas, then they would be responsible for assisting in maintenance of that, and that under the Lunenburg Police Department, they'll take all reasonable measures to assure public safety operations. I did have a conversation with the chief, and he believes that Mass General Law allows them to cross, and felt that he was comfortable with having this jurisdiction, and he said over the years they've never had a problem with them. And the final condition would be that the site plan be updated every 2 years to identify the current conditions, sort of an as-built of sorts at a 2-year interval, so the board or the overseeing authority at the time can get a sense of where they are in regard to their overall plan. And I think that to date they've submitted the things that have been requested. They've made all reasonable efforts to comply with what the town has asked for, and have been a good working partner to this point.
What is the difference in the height from where they are quarrying, the cellar of their quarrying now, to the top of those trees?
To the top of the trees?
Or the top of the land?
To the average grade, I believe it's 35 feet currently.
It's got to be more than 35 feet.
In Lunenburg, the bottom of the quarry is at 35 feet per the survey.
35
feet is a two-story house, two-story plus house.
Right. When you drive in.
From the base of the quarry up the wall to the base elevation when you drive in is 35 feet.
When you drive in, from there up, it's only 35 feet.
Oh, from there down.
Oh, from there down. What's
Quarry
it
goes
from there
down.
up? What's it from there up?
From where up?
When you drive in, not a pile of dirt. It's.
So, okay.
I'm not sure what kind of, geologically, I was asking him what kind of rock, so I don't know what kind of rock, but.
Let's orient ourselves. If we're driving down Fort Pond Road and we had permission and we were in an appropriate
Took a
vehicle,
right, is that
and
right?
we turned right
From Leominster Shirley
correct.
Road.
We turned right we're heading south on Fort Pond Road.
Whatever.
And we turn right into the Keating quarry with permission in an appropriate vehicle. We go up through the gate, the land rises up, I'm not going to, I would say it's maybe 8 or 10 feet of grade over a 100-foot span. And you get up to a flat area. You drive in, and there's a ramp down into the quarry, and the area is flat, and as you look west, the land kind of starts to rise, and then there's, is it a drumlin? More or less off to the west. And then there's the edge of the quarry, and that goes down 35 feet. Now, I believe in Lancaster, the quarry is deeper, and as you go down, you go into Lancaster, and to come back into Lunenburg, you rise up a small slope. Lancaster, the bottom of Lancaster is probably 50 feet? Oh, no, Lancaster's down 200. Oh, 200, okay, so.
Yikes.
So the Lancaster pit is down 200 feet, and the Lunenburg pit is down, or the Lunenburg quarry is down 35.
Okay. So, from the 35 up, what's the height of that stone?
I guess I don't understand your question.
When you're looking in, you can see a lot of stone up high. I'm just wondering how high it goes.
When you're looking from the base elevation
From the
into
road.
That's also 35 feet.
Okay, thank you. So it's 70 feet. Thank you. Did you find out what kind of rock it is?
Yes, it's quartz.
Quartz. Thank you.
I have
The best kind of rock.
question, Adam. This is permit 14.
Correct.
That is here tonight. 18 and
18 and 42 were
are good
renewed.
until August
Correct.
3rd, 2019. Now, at the end of it, it has the date of a new site plan being August 31st, 2021. How long is the earth removal permit for? Do we assign the time?
Currently, they're for 1 year.
So is this where a site plan would be renewed? Would we say the permit is good until then too?
I don't believe that allows you to do that under the current bylaw. I think for November town meeting, we'll be looking at doing the shift over to the planning board, which would be on the same timescale as what we've talked about before. And then my proposal would be to make these permits more than an annual permit.
Correct. So if
between 3 and 5 years would be my proposal.
Is no new information coming?
Correct. So that you may renew them every year, and every other year you'd say, okay, as part of your renewal, we need this updated plan. And if they don't provide it, then you have a conversation point at the renewal
Yeah,
hearing.
the renewals this year seem to trigger so many meetings that it might be nice to have them every couple of years.
Correct. And I think also what we're dealing with is starting last year with Commissioner Rhodes was the first in-depth review in several years of the earth removal permits, and he had some questions that generated additional questions from the Board of Selectmen. So I think this year was a hangover of that, going back and looking at what some of those permits said and did and what the conditions were and how they were applied.
So if we are to make a motion for this permit 14 with these 5, recommendations here, would this be for those 3 to be combined and good until?
Yeah, I believe that.
That's sort of missing
until
from
the end of August. So I think
Okay.
you've already approved 2 of them to the end of August. I think you could revoke those 2 and approve 1 permit that covers the whole. Or if you're uncomfortable doing that, you could approve 14 till the end of August with these conditions, and then when you come back to do the renewal, do something that incorporates them all into one.
Okay, but they all only make it until August
Correct.
31st, 2019 at this point.
Yes, and as it stands this year, the selectmen will do 1 more round of earth removal permitting, and Lord willing the creek don't rise, the planning board may be doing it next year.
Do you, if we combine them, is there a new recommended number?
No, I mean, I think you could keep 14.
Okay.
You could call it 86. I don't know I don't know what the numbering scheme looks like. We've seen it, and it's really kind of all over the map because there's 14 and 18 and 42, but there was only, I think, 13 earth removal permits that were issued. So for consistency's sake, it may be easy to keep 14.
And do these 5 recommendations apply to all 3 of them, or
Correct.
just to 14?
Yes, they apply to all because they all sort of work off of the same parcel and the same. They're all working off the quarry essentially. They're all part of that holistic plan that they submitted.
But there weren't any other conditions under 18 and 42 that we're going to get lost by?
No. These incorporate reviews of all 3 permits and the incorporation of conditions that were on some or all of those permits.
And do we have the authority to just revoke it and then give it
I
back?
believe that you do.
Okay.
Adam, quick question. In one of the public comments during the whole process, somebody discussed the closure vis-a-vis the abandonment of a quarry.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with your point about not recommending a detailed closure plan, but is there any kind of boilerplate language that says if they ever abandon it, some precaution has to be taken to mitigate the risk of drowning and that kind of thing? Are you familiar with anything that's a?
I mean, you could craft some sort of language, and the reality is, I think, in order for it to be what people experience as a quarry, there would need to be some water brought in from some place. And if they were to abandon it, let's say Old Castle and the Keating Family Trust decided tomorrow, we're done with this rock business, we're done with Lunenburg, we're going to go away, we'd really just have a big hole in the ground.
Okay.
And I don't believe it would fill itself in with water, in the near future.
And whether it be earth removal or planning or somebody who wanted to put water in it would have to get some sort of
Correct.
approval.
There'd have to be some effort to
Okay.
fill that with the amount of water that would be required to fill it.
Fair enough.
Okay, I suppose I would make a motion that we approve permit number 14 till August 3rd, 2019. But rather than even say revoke, I guess recommendation number 1 is to combine 14 with 1842, and perhaps we call it 14. And so it's saying to not renew I'm not sure about revoking or not renewing, but item number 1 is to combine these 3. So my motion would say to combine these 3 while approving 14. And then I suppose we'll read off the recommendations here, that it's subject to 1 new permit encompassing the whole area as shown on the site plan along with the appropriate conditions. Item 2, and Adam already mentioned these, is that there would be a 100-foot buffer from both Leominster Shirley and Fort Pond Road. The buffer zone with the expectation of the entrance driveway shall be kept. Oh, thank you. In a natural state, markers and signage shall be installed at the limits of the buffer. Item 3, reasonable effort to be exerted to curtail noise and dust with emphasis on safe and orderly flow of traffic by the said company. PJ Keating shall address all such complaints as may occur as directed by the town of Lunenburg. Item 4, this permit allows the PJ Keating Company to cross Fort Pond Road, Leominster Shirley Road, with any and all of its vehicles associated with earth removal, stone processing, and stone handling operations. Item 4 has an A, B, C, D, and E. A, this is an industrial operation that requires a passage over town roads to obtain access from one Keating-owned property to another. The nature of this industrial business requires these to be typically off-road heavy construction vehicles. As a result, they are unregistered, oversized, and overweight as it pertains to conventional over-the-road vehicular traffic. B, these vehicles shall be covered with general liability insurance as required by law. C, PJ Keating Company shall assume the sole liability for the public safety of its operations on these town roads. D, PJ Keating Company shall assume the responsibility of the repair of these roads as it relates to any degradation of these roads as a result of its industrial operation. E, PJ Keating Company will, under the Lunenburg Police Department's jurisdiction, take all reasonable measures to assure public safety where its operations impact these town roads. Now, recommendation item 5, the site plan shall be updated every 2 years showing current conditions. The first updated site plan shall be provided for the renewal in August 31st, 2021. And again, that this would be approved till August 31st, 2019. So that's the motion.
I would second it for discussion, but I think we should ask for a larger buffer where possible.
Okay, discussion?
I mean,
It's a big, ugly pit. You want as much buffer as you can from it. If there's already a larger than 100-foot buffer, figure out what that is and keep it at least 200 feet where possible.
with the berm and the way the grades are, adding more distance isn't going to.
Can it hurt? What's
No,
the
but they
harm?
need to run a business too, and it's material.
But they've already got the buffer. They've already got more than a 100-foot buffer.
So I think my general comment in terms of this motion and approving this is this particular permit, we've just said we've had it in January, February, March. We don't want to go to I think we're so close to August, we can look at new terms for the permit maybe in August when everything's renewing again. I feel like it would be nice to just let the permits get back into their cycle.
Again, just with the buffer that's there, the grade change of the buffer being that it's quite a large berm and the vegetation on top of it, you're not
I don't
going
know,
to see.
have you done a site walk? Do you understand what
I
the 100 feet is?
Drove
and
past
what-
that site every day of my life, twice a day for 7 years. I know it well in every season, and you can't see into the pit when you're driving down the road except through the entryway.
Right.
There's another 100 feet. Adding distance to an already blocked view isn't going to block the view anymore.
I don't see the harm.
I don't see the help, and it's the inverse of that is they're good contributing business to the town, and they should be able to access the material that they want to access out of it.
I agree with Damon that you're not going to unquarry the quarry with minutia.
But it's not, they're not quarrying there. They have the larger buffer is there, so why not keep it? I just don't see the harm.
Well, I don't see any advantage to increasing what's already part of the permit. To the original motion,
One comment, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Could we call it a different permit number? Because I know Gary spent many, many hours, as did Adam, tracking back all the various earth removal permits. And I think for historical purposes, for someone in the future to look back,
Okay.
it deserves a new.
Okay, I will amend my motion that it is not 14, and I'll look for a recommendation. Heather?
Could we, to be determined, so
Yeah,
we can
right.
look at all the other permit
Just-
numbers?
That we will
Yeah.
find a
Have
suitable
assigned
number.
a suitable, yeah. I
Okay.
think that's a reasonable.
Sure.
would you seconded, would you amend your second?
Sure,
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'm opposed because of the buffer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Let us know what
Thank
number
you.
it is.
Our next appointment is a Bring Your Own Bottle, BYOB, permit application for Whalum Kitchen, 324 Electric Avenue. Hi there. How are you tonight?
Well,
Tell us what you want to do.
things are going well at Whalum Kitchen. So I'm interested in a BYOB.
Just for the record, sir, could I have your name and
Yeah,
address?
Chris Lyons, owner of Whalum Kitchen.
Right.
At 324 Electric Ave.
Thank you.
Lunenburg. Yeah, we're interested in a BYOB. We've had some requests from some customers, and it's something that we kind of had thought about when we first opened, but wasn't something we wanted to do right away. And so we're a regular breakfast and lunch place, but we're going to do a fish fry for the 7 weeks of Lent. And I think that it would be something that, could add to our business and, add to the business. Obviously, there's really there's nothing in it for me. I'm not going to make any money on people bringing their own stuff. So I did come up with a list of some things that I do want to do. I'm going to limit, size of what you can bring in. I mean, I don't want people dragging in kegs of beer and big Yeti coolers and things like that. We're going to make sure that we're opening things such as champagne and wine bottles for people so that we can keep public safety paramount. We're also I see the stipulations in here, which I'm very familiar with, being a chef and in the food business for over 30 years. When people leave the establishment, we have to make sure that everything is sealed. If they're bringing something that's, if they're taking something out of there that it's, say they have a bottle of wine, they have a couple of glasses, it's half full. I've already purchased the sealable bags, which are also see-through, so that you can see what's in there. We've talked about it. My daughter, who's my assistant manager, is also a bartender at a couple of places as well, and she said it's probably a good idea for us to put a copy of the receipt inside that bag as well, so that if someone were to get pulled over for some reason, they could at least show where they were and why they have it. Tip certification. Again, my assistant manager, my daughter Jamie, is tip certified. I'm in the process of doing it, as well as my wife. We will all be there. Well, one of us will be there at all times whenever this is taking place. ID checks. I have experience doing that, as well as my assistant manager, my daughter. And those are kind of the precautions that we've made, and we plan on actually posting these as well, so that when people come through the door, they understand the ask. It's quite possible that we might actually even put it on a table tent that's on each table, so that people understand, what we're trying to do. That we're not trying to be a nightclub. We're just allowing people to unwind on a Friday night if they so desire.
What are the hours of your establishment?
Currently, we're open from 7 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, from Monday through Saturday. And we're open from 7 to 1 on Sundays. And my understanding is that I can open other hours. So the first thing that we've decided to do, and believe me, I'm not looking to work nights. I did that for many years. But we want to provide a fish fry for, during the Lent season, and possibly during the summer. We're going to see how it goes over the next 6 weeks.
And what will those hours be?
It's going to be from 5 to 9 on Friday nights.
5 to 9 Friday.
Now, would you allow this in the mornings, like on Sunday brunch or something like that, if someone wanted to bring
Yeah,
something?
so,
in?
yeah, when would BYOB?
Yeah, so we would probably, I mean, I don't foresee really people really taking advantage of it during the week necessarily.
Right.
I mean, I guess there are some people that do have Mondays off or whatever, some days off during the week.
Yeah.
Make commitments in for lunch and bring a couple of beers with them or something like that.
Okay.
And we would certainly govern that. And again, all those hours are taken up by our management. There's always somebody there that's on the management team, whether it's myself, my wife, or my daughter. If for some reason I'm on vacation, my daughter's there 7 days while we're gone.
And the board can issue that as part of the condition, the hours for the BYOB.
Right, exactly. So that would be my question. So as I read through the here, I don't see anything that restricts
Right.
hours. I mean, I personally don't drink at 7 o'clock in the morning, but I mean,
We were in Colorado, and there was a restaurant, it said they didn't serve before 7 a.m.
yeah.
They didn't serve drinks before 7
Again,
a.m.
Again,
You
it's
gotta have a sign for that.
I suppose it's, how you drink. I mean, I think that if people are looking to, drink on a regular basis or something like that, we're probably not coming to Whale and Kitchen to do that. Probably going to a bar room or a club, I would think, or on their back deck. But I think having a mimosa on a Sunday morning is kind of good. I'm a little partial to Bloody Marys myself, but, it's just something I think we might want to do. And when I'm going to implement this is still a little bit up in the air. My first fish fry is Friday night. We're going to have a meeting tomorrow, management, depending on how this thing goes, and we're going to discuss that, whether we want to implement it right away or, kind of maybe just do it on the Friday night to start off with. Because from what I read in here, I can restrict this even more than what you want me to, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if I decided I just wanted to restrict it to Friday nights, I could do that. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, you can certainly reduce
Okay.
limit yourself
Okay, yeah.
further than what we already
I just
limited.
didn't know, because I saw there was like a single time, like you could get a BYOB for like a single day.
Right.
So we're going to kind of do it softly. I'm not going to go home and start punching into Facebook. Hey.
Heather, how many BYOB permits do we have issued?
I don't think we have any currently right now.
There's none currently. Okay.
Delicious was.
They
Are they-
did. Yeah, I don't think they have one anymore.
That's the we are wine cordials now, right?
Well, that's what they were. They went back to be.
Oh, they went back.
For a short time, they went to
Okay.
BYOB.
Gotcha.
I'm not quite sure if there's anything going on there.
No.
Honestly, I drive by there every day. I mean, I don't really know what's going on, but
Right.
if they're even open, I'm not quite sure.
All right, I'd make a motion, we approve the BYOB license for Whalum Kitchen at 324 Electric Ave.
Second?
Any discussion?
I think I'd like to put hours on it or some type of, like with the breakfast, I'm not sure because I don't know if you'd like a mimosa to me, like to show up with like a jug. I get a little confused about
Sure.
how you safely show up and safely
So we've had this
leave.
discussion. And
certain types of
if a
alcohol.
single person were to walk through the door and they had, say, a handle in their
I have,
hand,
like, my pitcher,
a gallon of something, then we're probably going to discourage that. I'm going to politely ask them. And I think so we're going to limit the size. So the bags that I have really are made for a bottle of wine. So so from what we talked about, we would probably limit the size to, say, what they call a fifth, like a liter. And obviously, we're going to keep an eye on people. If one person walks through with a big bottle and they're just drinking and drinking and drinking, then we're going to have to use our tip certification in order to make that stop. If it's 4 guys and they come through and they want Bloody Marys and they have a bottle of vodka and they're sharing it amongst one another, then it might be a little more appropriate. So I think that I'm going to have to fall back on the tip certification. in my experience as a manager in order to, curtail that kind of activity. Just like you would with any bar room. I mean, people can overdrink at bar rooms. You don't necessarily know when the guy comes up and orders and they goes towards the back room where those drinks are going necessarily. It's up to management, and I understand that the liability and the responsibility falls on me, not necessarily on the customer.
And my other question to Heather would be, do people restrict the type of alcohol? Like I think there's, like a BOYB that might just allow wine and beer versus, people coming in with hard alcohol and nips. Like, I guess I feel like...
I think you can put any types of
That I
conditions
feel
on
like
this as you
there's
feel
a-
appropriate.
I feel like I would feel better if it had some language built in, either based on time or based on types, or maybe it's just I would like to see that's why I asked if other restaurants have these in town, what they look like.
It's not an alcohol license. It's a license to let somebody bring something in themselves and be supervised by someone who's tip certified. I personally don't see a distinction between somebody bringing in, a bottle of champagne and ordering orange juice and making a mimosa, or somebody bringing in a small bottle of alcohol and ordering tomato juice and having a Bloody Mary. I think that's up
I
to
agree.
I think that's up to the business owner to take care of that.
And it's
Right,
just,
And also the person coming
Yeah,
in to visit the restaurant,
exactly.
A Sunday morning, a Bloody Mary is often
Right.
appropriate.
I can assure you that I am not going to allow my place to become a place where people come and drink, because I rely on a lot of families in this town that
Right.
come to my establishment. They're children, and people have fun. And if I see this thing going south, I'll be the first guy to pull the plug. Believe me, because I'm successful already. My business is successful. I mean, and it's growing, and this is just something I want to add to. Just add to see how it goes, and again, if it doesn't go well, I'll be the first to put the kibosh on it. Believe me.
yeah, I mean, I purposely didn't include any hours or restrictions in my motion because it's a breakfast place. I've been there. It's not built to be a drinking
Right.
room, and again, it's not for sale. You're not profiting off of it. You're
Right.
going to keep an eye on it. So I don't
Exactly.
think hours or anything like that is
I think the
needed.
fish fry will probably be the most predominant time
Yeah,
that
right.
people, have a couple of beers and some fish and chips. I get it. I mean, they go together quite well, actually.
And were you zoned for any specific hours of operation in terms if you chose to stay open to midnight or 2, or it's...
No, not that I remember from when I got my business license. I don't believe there was any restrictions. I mean, right next to me there is a in the same. Are you familiar with where I'm at?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so right next to me is Kindred Spirits. Used to be Mickey Shays.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're a full service bar room basically.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'll go. I go with I on the BYOB, but
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
So you're going to start fish and chips this week?
I am. We're going to serve scallops and clams and shrimp as well,
Oh, cool. Good
starting Friday night.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Please don't tell too many people. Exactly how it's going to go.
and bring
Thank
your
you.
own beer.
Our 7:20 appointment is with the Land Use Director on the current draft of the special event permit.
Hello again.
Hi.
So you've already heard some comments.
Yep.
And, I did speak with one of the commenters earlier today, and they did raise the issue of, the liability insurance and having low number of attendee events being exempt. And I guess I would defer that to the board. One thing I will comment on that we spoke about is on page 2, under tents and sleeping trailers. I would like to add an amendment after the first word after the colon says tents, and it should say tents over 200 square feet. Those tents do require a building permit. They require fire retardant certificates, all that kind of good stuff. So the concern was this would be, if the event were permitted for camping, that every individual Coleman or Mountain Hardware or other tent would be required to be inspected by the fire department, and that's not the intent of that. Those tents are not structures, and they're not required to do that. But the larger party tents or gathering tents that you might see put up by commercial tent rental companies do have building code requirements for wind loading and fire protection and that kind of stuff.
So where do you want to insert it, after the first word?
Yep. So it would say tents over 200 square feet and trailers require an inspection and permit.
So a little individual camping tent is just not mentioned at all in the regulations?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, those, if you're willing to sleep in it, then it's your choice.
Okay.
So, in any trailer? Has to
Well,
have-
sleeping trailers, and if you have a food trailer, that's obviously covered under Board of Health permitting because they're serving food out of it.
Yeah, but, I mean, trailers, are you thinking about like something people sleep in?
Yes.
So they have to need a permit from the town?
If you're doing it as an event, I believe that would be appropriate.
So people can bring tents, but they can't bring trailers?
Correct. Trailers would tend to be larger, would have the potential for greater impact if there was some sort of catastrophic failure.
Well, what about camping trailers, though? There's a lot of really little camping trailers.
I mean, I'm making recommendations. The board is welcome and
Is there
has.
a qualifier around trailers? Do you want to treat pop-up trailers the same as RVs? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm sort of torn on that because, you start bringing a whole bevy of RVs into a place and, next thing you know, you're K of A and.
Right.
But, pop-ups, a lot of people just don't like to sleep on the ground. It's a tent, but it's just off the ground.
Yeah, that's my point. You see, if we make the change that Adam just recommended, then this whole policy is silent on tents. And I'm suggesting that we may want it to be silent on pop-ups too, and somehow qualify. I don't know if there's such a way to do it.
Yeah,
big trailers.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
what I
I
mean?
guess,
Yeah.
you parse that out, and sometimes some of these events have staff or other that partake in sleeping trailers, and those things would certainly need to, they're essentially bunkhouses on wheels, and, even if they're relatively small. I do take the point about pop-up trailers because many people own them, and some of them are very luxurious. I guess there's probably a way to parse that out. Let me think about that while we kind of run through this.
I'd like to have, small trailers excluded, like small tents.
And so we'll go back to the beginning. We've changed the definition of a special event to any private event or activity held on public property or any event open to the general public held on private property. We dropped the 50 people or more, and I think that really comes from the events on public property. If someone were to have a wedding on the gazebo or something to that effect, it may not be 50 people, but you may want to run through some of these procedures to ensure that the use of the roads adjoining the gazebo isn't impeded by some sort of wedding event. That's a simple one to kind of come up with. 4 events per year. I took a stab at 1 event per season, or packing 4 events into a summer. Obviously, the board asked for a number. That was the number I came up with. I'm happy to adjust it as desired. The exemptions, this I think covers a lot of the things that we talked about.
Can I go back to that first paragraph before you go on to exemptions?
Sure.
Or it says, in the first sentence, where is it? So a special event is any private event activity held on public property or an event open to the general public held on private property that involves or affects directly or incidentally the ordinary use of parks, playgrounds, fields, public buildings, streets, and rights-of-ways and/or sidewalks. It doesn't say anything about private property.
You know, I inadvertently didn't delete that. It should have just been a period after the held on private property.
Oh, held on, okay, so then,
So that's just the definition.
what should I cross off?
So it should be a period after property, and then from that to the period would be stricken.
Okay.
So you're getting rid of the,
Down to sidewalks?
Correct.
Can you read
Okay.
it as it shall be?
A special event is any private event activity held on public property or an event open to the general public held on private property. Special events may include, but are not necessarily limited to, yada, yada, yada.
Okay. All right, so that makes more sense, thank you.
And I have a little question for bullet point exception, sporting events held in conjunction with Lunenburg Public Schools. Are all of our sports specifically associated with Lunenburg Public Schools, or some of the organizations like Lunenburg Youth Soccer, are they really associated with the public schools, or are they just Lunenburg-based sports organizations? That would be my question, to drill down through lacrosse and this and that.
Yeah, you know, those
Some of them aren't
those aren't associated with
completely
the school, but they are a regular event and they are permitted by the school.
I was just looking for a different word there. Sporting events held in conjunction with Lunenburg Public Schools. Sporting events held in
How
conjunction.
about held
Approved by.
oh yeah, that was kind of, I was trying to figure out where, approved by Lunenburg Public Schools.
Something to
Yeah,
put it,
that's
make it a
true.
little bit
Yeah.
more generic, in case some of those sports organizations aren't specifically under the umbrella of the public schools, but still sort of would apply.
And they
Yeah,
all-
because
they
most
all
of the
have to-
sports are happening on school property or town property.
So they,
How about we say Lunenburg Public Schools or
Park
Lunenburg
Department?
Parks Department? Because I'm thinking of a sport that I don't participate in, baseball, that's held on town property.
but it's not school-related.
Correct.
Parks
So
Department.
the school's not approving the
The
Little
schools
League
are the
or the
parks.
softball league, but
Now, I'm assuming, like, there's some typos in here, and I'll just tell you those later.
that's fine. And, you know, and then I think that the other thing that came up was things like landowners associations and their private events for membership, and I tried to cover that by membership organizations where only members and guests are permitted. And, you know, that could theoretically be extended to, you know, a variety of different events or places. I dialed the time in to 6 to 10
So
per
it's,
the...
it's, like, 6 a.m. or 6 p.m.?
6
Not
a.m.
after 10 a.m.
10
or
p.m.
before 6 a.m.
Okay, after 10 a.m. before 6, so that they can start at 6 o'clock in the morning? That seems early.
No, after 10.
No.
Yeah, but they can start
After
at
10
6 in the
and
morning.
before 6, so.
So like a fishing derby.
Fishing derby, some road races,
6?
cycling events may start that early. Other things.
I think 6 is too early.
Oh, it does say that loudspeakers and music and bullhorns have to be regulated by the permit. So if it's just a quiet fishing derby.
Oh, yeah, have you ever experienced a fishing derby? There ain't nothing quiet about those things.
At 6 in
zooming
the
around.
morning, it's quiet. At 6 p.m., it usually gets a little rowdy.
No, it's very noisy at 6
It's when they
p.m.
BYOB
because they got
there.
those gigantic motors.
Not on my lake.
Yeah, but you don't have any fishing derbies on your lake. I think 6 is too early.
Again, I'm making recommendations. It was noted that the noise bylaw as proposed had 6 o'clock as the end of quiet hours, so I was going back and mirroring that proposal.
I mean, I think since they're new regulations, I don't think you want to get overly restrictive for the sake of an unintended consequence.
And And it does say events are prohibited. It doesn't say that you can't, based on the event,
Because
limit
First
someone.
condition it,
you
right?
would
Yeah.
be
Right.
prohibiting a fishing derby from starting at 6.
Right. That's the idea.
But they get up early. I mean, some might start at 5.
But I also think that if an event came in that you felt wasn't appropriate to begin at 6 o'clock, you could say, well, we're going to condition that this permit not start till 8 o'clock.
But you also could have it start at 7 and go, oh, for you guys, we'll let you start at 6.
Oh, that feels
That's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You always can waive the restrictions. I think as a general rule, 7 is appropriate.
I don't think we're going to get a lot of requests for gigantic events at 6 or 7 a.m.
Well, then, let's just humor me and make it 7.
And I'll leave it up to the board. What I would say is, my experience has been it's better to situationally condition than to regularly waive.
Yes,
Because
I
if you're
agree.
regularly waiving something, then you're admitting that
listen,
the regulation could be an error.
I listen to the planning board and the Conservation Commission waive things all the time that I think they shouldn't. But, so I understand what you're saying. I don't anticipate that we'll be waiving the 7 o'clock.
And again, I as I said, I defer to the board, but
Right.
that's. And then there was a request for pointing to some sort of regulations on traffic or parking. Parking, I can't really help you out with. I mean, that's regulated through zoning, and we're talking about something that's not necessarily a zoning permit. We're on page 2, bottom of the left column. So I added in a reference to our traffic rules and order, and making sure that any parking and traffic plans don't violate those. It's at least sort of the basis of how we regulate the roadways in town. It'd prevent parking on streets where it's not allowed or permitted, and maybe get away from some of the areas that are already regulated under there. Buffer zone.
Fireworks. Are fireworks licensed in Lunenburg? Can you have fireworks in Lunenburg?
You can get a professional permit from the fire department for
Okay.
fireworks anywhere. I believe, if I recall correctly, there's state regulations on how they get issued, and the fire department can issue them. And again, we're not talking about. I just got back from Connecticut and got this wicked big box of fireworks.
No, I
it's
mean, I just
you're
didn't know
going
if-
and hiring someone and
I
spending.
didn't know if that licenses were approved. I just didn't know that.
I mean, I will double check with the fire chief on whether or not he's ever issued one. I'm going to guess that if he has, it's been a while.
I have no problem with it saying they're prohibited unless they're licensed, and then the license, whatever the licensing requirements are, governs.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you even needed it, because I didn't think that they were licensed. But if you need it, you need it.
I mean, I've worked in similar sized communities where they had an annual 4th of July event that they would spend $10,000 to hire someone to come and do fireworks, and the fire department would permit it. Buffer zone, we talked about what was reasonable. So, some of the discussion seemed to think that 150 was too much, and some felt that 50 was too little, so I kind of split the difference and rolled it back to 100, which is a little more measurable, a little bit more visually easy to wrap your head around.
In that section where it says, upon submission of a written request supported by documentation, the Board of Selectmen may reduce this distance at their discretion.
Correct.
And then it says, under reasonable circumstances. I don't know why you need under reasonable circumstances. Do you think the Board of Selectmen's going to reduce this distance under unreasonable circumstances? I mean, it just seems unnecessary verbiage.
I'm happy to take it out. There was
Thank
a
you.
discussion of reasonableness, so I included
But
it
we're
in there.
reasonable, so.
I don't know that you'll be the Board of Selectmen for the next 100 years, though.
Oh, come on now.
And then I included a...
Just to I would feel more comfortable maybe if you wanted to change it, but just leaving it at our discretion with no extra language feels a little powerful. We'll just change it at our discretion. I don't know. So I feel like it's nice to add something in there, sort of describing what our discretion should be.
Well, the license,
Just extra words.
the whole license is at our discretion.
Right. I really am opposed to throwing words around that don't serve any purpose.
Why establish feet at all if we're just going to really own that we can change it however we like? I'd rather have something and just kind of be like, that's what it is, so that we know what to go off of.
No, it's good.
Discretion feels very difficult because then it feels like,
Well, you have.
I don't
what-
like terms
there's-
like playing favorites, but if you're not consistent in these things, I feel like it becomes very uncomfortable over time.
No, but the events aren't consistent. We talked about this last time, because you can have a big event on a large piece of property, or you can have a small event on a piece of property in the center of town where the property isn't 100 feet wide. So there's special circumstances that you need to be able to address small properties. And again, if it's a reasonable thing, you're not going to have a huge party at the piece of property that's not 100 feet wide.
On the
But you
flip
need to be able to adjust it.
Somebody may have a very, very large parcel, but maybe 90% of it's wetlands, and there's just a tiny bit that's usable space that's really up close to all of its abutters. So the parcel size doesn't really change the fact that even with a very large parcel, you could put your event very, very close to one particular abutter.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. You may need to allow people to do that.
Well, I'd be very worried about abutters and sort of unintended consequences. I think we should establish a zone and have it apply.
We have established a zone,
Or
100 feet from a budding property. We've
How
established.
about, may reduce this distance based on the size and scope of the event?
Right, I think we can put some sort of scale in there so that when people come, you can specifically document why you're making a choice. Like, I feel more comfortable as a variety of things come, that every time you can go to the same criteria and say, this is why we're making this choice, because in the bylaw it states this. Discretion in these situations, I think, creates a lot of uncertainty and stress as you have events come through and you give out different circumstances to different people.
It's not a bylaw, it's a special events permit.
May reduce this distance at their discretion based on the size and scope of the event.
It's just a proposal.
I think
Yeah,
that's a good one.
or were
Yeah.
you,
Works for
or,
me.
I give up. I think they're just extra words, but.
well,
if it
and I
makes
guess the
people
other
happy.
question would be, we could remove at their discretion and put may reduce this distance based on the size and scope of the event. I think what
Fine.
I think, we're trying to get to a place where everybody's comfortable and
Compromise.
then the final thing was I added just a small flow chart to show.
Yeah, my
What-
only, it's not even a concern, but is there any way to build a timing thing into the flow chart, or is that as different as?
Yeah,
it-
I was thinking that it's.
I would love to have
so many
this, so many things in advance, I hate to
Well,
make
it's
these
required to be
decisions right at
filed
the-
60 days in advance.
Okay,
Per
fine.
the,
Where does it say that, just so I,
Oh, in the event someplace, right in the very beginning. I
Oh, in
think.
in the welcome and instructions.
oh, okay, cool.
Isn't that where it says it?
It was right in the beginning, as I recall.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's in the second paragraph under, on the first page. Individuals or organizations wishing to hold special events on public or private property must obtain permit from the town of Lunenburg. Applications must be filed a minimum of 60 days prior to the event.
So when you,
Cool,
I was
thank
looking
you.
at that, and when you're going through, can you get through those first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things in a month, you think?
Well, it doesn't
Yeah.
stipulate that we have to do it within 60 days. They have to just do it.
They have to submit it 60 days
60
prior
days.
to their event.
Yeah, right.
So if
you-
if they file it, and that starts the 60-day clock, and it takes us, we'll say, 20 days to get together and So the distribution happens the next day, we'll say, 59 days. Meeting with relevant departments to discuss, I mean, generally we can all, or the majority of us can get together within 14 days. So even if you call it 20, that gets you down to 39. Submission of comments, 38, that still gives you a month to, or 3 meetings.
Yeah, I think as long as we're like down here
So
in a month, get through that 1, 2, 3, get through those first 4 within a month.
I don't see any reason why those first 4 couldn't be done within a month.
It doesn't say we're obligated to come to a conclusion in 60 days, and I'm just wondering if it should, or if that is sort of something you don't want to get into.
Well, it has to. The event's going to be in 60 days.
No, it doesn't say that we have to. I'm saying if I'm thinking of the applicant, do we want to protect them by saying that we will follow this through within the 60 days, because it doesn't say that we have to. So somebody could come in with the 60 days and for one reason or another, we don't get to it for 90 and basically it never happens. So I'm just saying to protect the applicant.
In my experience, the reality is the other way around. We're running around to try to help them have their event, and we still have some open questions. So I think the board tends to want to approve them. It's just, have we had enough time to when you schedule the meeting to approve it and a question comes up, do you have time to go research that question? That's the only. I don't know that any board would ever sit on it more than 60 days unless
they were required to for some
extenuating
reason.
circumstances.
And I don't know how I feel about it. I'm just posing the question, would we want to, I mean, I know certain types of permits and
I
things.
don't want to add any liability that if somebody invested a lot of money and we didn't get it done, we get hung by our own words.
I guess where it's new, I would give yourselves the leeway to not have that in there.
Right.
And if it's something that you find is constantly an issue, you can readjust those timeframes, and maybe you require submission within 90 days prior, and you must hold your first public your first meeting, however you want to call it, within 45 days, and give yourself that kind of time frame. I think what I was trying to do is kind of make it a shorter window for the applicant.
Somebody may do all the work and get no answer from us. That's a scenario that could occur, correct?
Sure.
That's all I'm not sure if I'm being clear in what I'm asking. My concern is
I think that's entirely.
somebody has an event, they're going through all the work.
That's always possible.
There's nothing in this timeline that says that we ever have to formally respond. I'm just thinking of the applicant and the stress of the fact that there's no deadline that says you will hear from us one way or the other.
And I'm thinking of the town. I don't want somebody to be able to sue us because we have a line in our policy that says we're going to act within 60 days and their event got screwed up. I think that.
Well, I think it gets screwed up
I think
by.
we should start with the assumption that they want to do an event, we want to help them do it, and we're all going to work together to get it done.
And if we find after we've used this a few times that we're getting through it either
Then you
really
adjust the
quicker
timeline, right?
or it's taking longer, then we adjust the
Correct.
timeline.
And so now I'd like to go back and sort of talk about some of the comments made during public comment in regard to this agenda item. And I guess open studios for artists, I guess by the wider letter of it, they meet this criteria, but I think that they could also be viewed in other ways, where an artist is using a room or rooms of their house to produce their work that they're selling. It in some ways becomes a home occupation, and inviting people in as an open studio could be viewed as an extension of that home occupation. It would be similar to, I know some liquor stores will have craft breweries or local wineries or distilleries come in and offer tastings in the aisles, not necessarily even as an event, but just as a an enhancement to a Saturday or Friday evening shopping experience. And I think an open studio is probably more analogous to that than a special event. It's not a gathering of sorts. It was brought up to me about open houses. Again, you're not specifically having an event in so much as you're inviting people in to view your home. And yes, it's in general public on private property, and I'm sort of struggling with how to parse those two out, because I don't again, they're analogous under those words, but in function and form, I don't think that they're the same, because you have sort of a roving band of people stopping by and popping in, and you're visiting and going. You're not having 30 people come and hang out and eat cheese plates in your living room, or listen to a band and have more parking issues and the things that are associated with that. So
Here's where I get jammed up. I'm with you, and when I heard the public comment, my first thought was it's kind of more of a home business, and they probably want to do it more than 4 times a year, and I was going down that track. What if we're talking about an artist that's in a totally residential place where it's inappropriate, and they want to do this once or twice a year? Can they get around the zoning part of that?
Well,
Do
again,
they need something like this to get around the zoning part of that?
if they're working out of their home, that's permitted through zoning.
It is.
We allow home
Anywhere in town.
anywhere in town.
Oh, my question.
Any residential
my
district.
question's withdrawn.
So, and especially if they're selling the art, that that right there just says business to me, from a variety of different perspectives. And I don't know if it would be more advantageous to add an exemption for business purposes, but I don't want to.
My feeling is
It doesn't qualify as a
it's
special
not relevant
event
to this.
because
lives
they're
over there.
technically potential customers, and and I guess the open.
So the artist studio really just doesn't
it-
even
it-
come into play.
I would say it's not a special event. It's a
Right.
use of,
Because
you
we
know, it's
don't
a-
really want to discourage cottage industry. It's not-
No,
in our
and I think
community.
that's ultimately when the zoning was rewritten recently. We had a very long discussion about home businesses, and we had and continue to have a very liberal home business or home occupation section in our zoning bylaw. We allow for 2 people not residing at the home to be employed there. We don't limit it to the type of business that you can do. It just says a room or rooms or building on your property. So theoretically, you could have a barn or carriage house in which you conduct some manner of business. So, and there was a lot of discussion about, do we need to rein that in? Do we not need to rein that in? Is 2 too many? Is 2 not enough? And the board was really like, we have a lot of people who conduct business out of their homes for a variety of reasons, and they really want to encourage that. And I think that artists and craftsmen are really the most pure extension of that, and really what home business kind of grew out of.
So this isn't even germane to open studios then?
And again, it's a conversation. I would say probably not, because
I would
they're
agree.
conducting
I'd probably word it different. This doesn't restrict what
Correct.
rights they already have.
It
Right.
doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't restrict their ability to conduct business.
So I sort of, are Elena's wine tastings, would they be special events?
If she's holding them in her,
She's holding them in the walkway.
She has a business, so it wouldn't apply. It's not on public property. It's not on
yeah, and
private
it's an extent.
property.
It is on private property,
But she's
but she's conducting her.
Running
She's conducting it on her business property.
No, she's outside of her business. She's in the
of a
walkways and
sidewalk.
things. It's not inside.
That's her landlord's property, right? It's not town property.
Yeah, no, that's all. It's all part of the property she pays
yeah,
rent
it's private.
for.
I'm just
Zoned
wondering.
for
I'm
business
I'm
use.
Yeah,
trying-
it's
I'm-
a-
That's something
It's
I see.
not
There's a lot of people
residential
there.
reason.
It happens a couple times a year. They're selling things.
I mean,
I don't know.
It could really parse out either way. I think that, again, you're getting into a place where someone is. I think for me, they're charging for the wine tasting.
Yep.
And selling in addition to.
Yeah.
So I don't know if, and it's.
I think we sort of should have that clear before we wrap up the special permit. What does this apply to, and not have it ambiguous?
I agree with Phyllis, and this reminds me of something that Heather said at the end of the last time we had this discussion, was to break it down between public events are always okay on public property. Private events, like a birthday party, are okay on private property. And where it's crossing over is when there's a public event on private property or private event on public property. And in this case, your example sort of falls into a public event occurring on a private property.
That's
but
sort
it's
of
a
where I'm-
business versus a residence, and I don't know if there's a separation to be made.
It's the sale of
concept
tickets, I
there.
think, is really where it's kind of tipping me over, because it's creating an event out of it, as opposed to my other example, if Elena had vendors come and offer tastings of their products, little half-ounce tasting, and then had the products for sale in her shop, and people would walk around and mill about and taste the products and then go and buy them, then it seems more of an extension of the business, as opposed to, we're going to charge a fee for you to come to this wine tasting event. If you're here, you can also buy this stuff.
Okay, so what I feel like is happening in my mind is when there's the public event on private property, there's two totally different circumstances if it's residential versus commercial. Because I'm thinking, what about like a power sports store having a huge open house, come check out these things? That's a private place having a public event. They're not public, come to my private event, but it's commercial. And like Elena's is commercial. It's so different that if I'm going to, on my property, a residential, have a gigantic festival.
But if the power sports place is going to bring in a DJ and a food truck and all of that,
they could, like a big open house event.
Oh, and I understand, and I've seen motorcycle dealerships do this before, and we required them to go through a similar type process
that would be
based
a
on
special permit, right?
on what they were bringing in. They were bringing in something that was going to draw a crowd of people that's in excess of what you would normally intend for there to be on that commercial property.
So then,
and there would be noise, there would be food, there would be kids and families, and
So they'd need a special permit.
so then the Elena's example falls into that. And
yeah, that's how I would interpret
make
it.
sure
And that's
we
why
understand
the
how we're
more I
impacting
think about
everybody.
it does kind of fall into that same hole.
I think size and scope is the important piece of that, because, we don't want to be
We don't want to discourage
Right,
people.
I don't.
charging for small events, but when
But
you're
there's
talking,
certainly more than 50 people there.
but we're not limiting it to people. We took out the restriction amount of people.
Well, how do we know what to permit and what not to permit?
I think
And that feels a little
there's the
confusing.
triggers of, is it going to require special permitting through the fire department? Is it going to require additional licenses through Board of Health or?
It is if we're telling them.
How
they
do we
have
know,
to.
like, do they need to have more restrooms? Do they fall into these, what triggers it? And I feel like we need to be really aware of.
That's why a review process is important to determine, I think in the end, if a special permit is even needed. All these departments need to come together to do the review, to see the full scope of the project and what's needed for public safety, what's needed for Board of Health regulations.
And I think
But to your point, you don't want it to be arbitrary. You don't
Right,
want-
I mean,
you don't
you
want the
don't-
boards to go, oh, we really like Elena's, we're not going to charge them, but
Right, because
somebody
if
else
it
we
falls
would.
under it, then it's going to happen and it's
Right.
going to be triggered, and we want to know that we're okay
But I think that
implementing
review
that.
Don't want it to be
process
arbitrary.
is critical, because, and we keep using Elena, so I'm going to not pick on her, but I'm going to stick with it. If she comes in one year and the group sits down and meets and says, we don't need to review this, they've got this, they've got that, happens every year, we don't think it triggers this, we don't think it falls into it, we forward those comments to the Board of Selectmen. The next time she goes to do it, then she's like, oh, well, I already know that I don't need to do this. And if someone comes and gets one, then they know, okay, the next time I do this same event, I need to go through this process. I don't think the board has set or even discussed any fees, so I don't know that there's a fiduciary impact in the larger scheme of things to this, to an applicant.
Well, I think the fee is dependent on what the cost of the town is. What does it cost the town to issue the fee? You've got lots of people working on it, so there's got to be some. It's got to be some cost to the town, so there's got to be some fee.
I agree, but what I'm saying is the board hasn't gotten to that point, so that's certainly I think part of the how does it impact someone who may want to do it.
I really like having the special event permit guidelines so people understand when they're doing one what they need to do and the flow chart and everything. So I think this is really valuable. But rolling out something new like this, I think you just really need to understand any scenario that's triggered and how to make people aware that they are triggering it.
And what are the unintended consequences?
So it's like,
always.
I think part of the problem is there's no way to cover every scenario. And the harder you try to cover every scenario, the more likely you are to have someone find a scenario you didn't cover and
I just don't want to be
exploit it.
accidentally restrictive to something
and
that we're not
I
thinking
agree,
of.
and I understand, and I'm sensitive to that as well. It's there isn't an easy way to do it.
Right, because the first time we talked about this, the pirate hunt my kids did fell under it.
Correct.
You know, and you have language in there that kind of protects that situation now. I'm like, oh God, we have to permit the pirate hunt. So it's like, that's my biggest fear
Sure.
with restrictions is that you wake up one day and you've restricted something you didn't intend to.
And the board always has the opportunity to amend this.
Correct. And
This is
now,
working.
this would be part of the Board of Selectmen's rules and regulations? Is that what
Policy.
the policy? And is there a section in your policy that allows you to waive portions of the policy?
We could make a policy for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just speak practically, I think that what I like best about this is it's a process that lays out what somebody who's thinking about doing something goes through. And as we do this more and more and more, we're going to find out that some percent of these things get kicked out in box number 3 because we get to the point where we realize, this doesn't really need all this. And some of the other ones say, gee, we really do need to get all these 5 people to buy off on it. And both of those occurrences let us modify the policy from year to year and make it tighter. But right now, I think we finally have something on a piece of paper that says if you want to have this event, here's the couple of things you need to at a minimum do, and here's the people that need to look at it as it works its way through the process. And because there's so many different sizes and shapes and types, I don't know that we want to try to cover every single one of them out of the gate.
I kind of tried to just do a shotgun shot that was going
I
to
think you've done a
capture
good job
stuff
on it.
and
Right.
lay out kind of where the town would come from and what things they would want to look at and how they would want people to approach doing these events. Because even small events can turn pear-shaped very quickly if some of these very small things aren't caught or talked about, or someone doesn't give someone a minor piece of advice that they wouldn't have thought of.
But, I would like to see this cleaned up and take a look at it with the few adjustments we've made before we vote on it.
Sure, it would be neat if we picked like a variety of things and ran it through it. So for example, the Boys and Girls Club, would that be considered a private membership organization?
Yes.
So then that exemption would free them because they have a lot of events.
Correct.
But
They are a
then
private membership
their
organization.
the bullet point events held by private membership organizations are exempted. So then their haunted houses and things are exempt.
No, the haunted house is open to the public, not just their members.
See, again, so these are, I just like all these hypothetical, I mean, are we now just going to be needing to?
No, because it says there they're members and guests are the only people coming.
No, but they have open to the public events.
Well, then it doesn't qualify under this paragraph.
They
Which means they need a special permit.
I think
Need a permit.
a majority of their events are for their members and their guests.
We're getting some input from the, behind you here.
What's that?
Not the major event.
Not the major.
Not the 5K run, not the haunted house. What? They've had yard sales.
Okay, but how many of those events are held at the Boys and Girls Club? Other than the haunted house?
But they might still trigger some of our
Correct.
rules here.
They may trigger
I don't want
your regulations.
hundreds of special permits to inadvertently be created. I mean, imagine the work it would be for all that these groups already do if now they have to come before us.
But if they want to have an event in a place other than their place and open it to people other than their members, they should come here and do all the same things everybody else does.
There's a lot of things already happening that with these new rules will trigger a lot more work on those organizations to seek these permits potentially. So I'm just brainstorming here that we might not want to create so much work for groups that already do a lot of work, and what would we gain? Like what would we gain by having the Boys and Girls Club come for special permits? And these are just questions, not opinions. It's just sort of like think tank in the situation.
Well, we can try it out, and if it turns out that it seems to be too cumbersome.
But once we trigger it, once it's a rule, we really need to implement it wherever it applies. And
Until we change it. So, it's not set in stone. It can be altered. And if the Boys and Girls Club is having big events,
And
why
I
not
think
get
that
a special
quite
permit?
frankly, the Boys and Girls Club for things
And I'm
like
just using them as just
no,
one other
and
example.
and what was brought up was the run. I don't think they do that in a vacuum. I think that they do perform a fair amount of coordination with the town on setting that up. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So this doesn't make them do extra work. It just puts that work into this other formal process.
And it makes sure that any other organization that wants to do the same kind of thing
Correct, is doing
learns
the same-
from
yes.
their process.
Correct.
Like the PTO has a lot of things that are open to the public. They don't all take place in Lunenburg either. So it's like sometimes these scenarios apply if it's in town, but a group's putting together something that may
Things that
trigger
are happening
a
out of
permit.
town we don't have control over.
No, I know, but then it just shows that maybe it's not necessary to do it in town. So if the PTO has an event and it's a trivia night and it might somehow trigger this, if they hosted it in town, they'd need a permit, but if they cross the borders and do it out of town, they don't. So is it necessary to trigger permitting things in town that aren't? I'm just concerned about restricting events in a way that's going to create a lot of, we see what happens with earth removal permits. We're like, yeah, come back in 9 months and we'll maybe you can do that thing. And I don't want to bog down these nice events that we have with a set of rules that they're going to fall into. So I think that just means more work on exemptions. So we just brainstorm on things that shouldn't be restricted because it just doesn't fit into what we're trying to accomplish, I guess. We're really just trying to, special events, especially in regards to abutters and circumstances, like a special event held in the Lunenburg Auditorium doesn't have an impact when it's after hours and they've booked the auditorium. So I think we're trying to protect the impact of special events to people in town, but.
Well, where it says, exemptions, where it says sporting events approved by the Lunenburg Public Schools, leave out sporting. Events approved by the Lunenburg Public Schools. That would take care of, PTO and all the school stuff.
And that's why maybe we have another meeting where we all come with like these little examples that we want to run through this and make sure that there aren't unintended consequences and really mostly unintended burdens on groups in town by having new rules that are going to trigger an extra set of hurdles and a lot of extra
But I don't
work.
know that the public schools approve PTO events, do they?
Oh, I'm sure.
If it's within the school building, we have to, the
Correct,
superintendent has to approve it.
But a trivia night that you hold at a hall wouldn't fall under that.
Well, it's reported at,
Bylaws pertaining to the school and
And they're reported on at the school committee meetings as PTO representatives. It's really intertwined with the schools.
I just think that we could hypothesize about hundreds of different things that may or may not happen. I'd like to take something that we have, if we need to have one more meeting on it, that's fine. Put it in place, learn from it. If we find out that we're approving all of them, then maybe we exclude that type of thing. If we find out we're coming across things that are problematic, well, then that was a good thing, because it taught us that we have to include that step when we do it for other groups.
And so my recollection is that the board wanted to review this one more time, then potentially post a public hearing
Yep.
to advertise it. So I can have a clean copy of this back to the town manager by Thursday. So if you wanted to schedule a public hearing.
That would be my preference.
That I think would be the
we're ready to do
opportunity
that.
to discuss this. So
Do me a favor and send it to me too, because there's a couple of typos I want to
I
make
did send it
sure
to you today.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
I
you mean the new
cleaned up
yeah.
copy. So we'll come
The are we removing sporting events?
I think you're
or are we just-
embellishing it by adding "and on parks." You had a
I
sentence
did.
in there.
Yeah, but are we removing sporting or are we keeping it in?
Oh, you mean
Events held events
approved by
approved
the Lunenburg Public
by
Schools
the
or Park
by
Department?
Lunenburg Public Schools or Lunenburg Parks Department.
All that's doing is taking our authority and giving it to somebody else.
Well,
I would assume,
Well, we had sporting events before.
And I think the sporting events
because we have
was
very little authority over the
in
the sporting
response
field.
to
school events are exempted under bullet 1 for the most part. Town events held on
No,
town
no.
property. So
yes.
homecoming held- Yes.
If they're oh, I see what you're saying.
So like a homecoming, it's a town event on town property, school or otherwise. So many of these events are exempted under bullet 1.
I'm comfortable excluding sporting events because the Board of Selectmen doesn't really have jurisdiction over either school property or park property.
Okay.
But taking that word out says all events that have anything to do with any of those groups, I'm not comfortable with taking that
Okay,
out.
so we'll leave it in then.
And the other thing that was brought up, and I know we're trying to wrap this up, I know you have a full agenda, was the impact of insurance on smaller events and the liability requirements under the guidance document. And I've looked at a number of communities, and this seems to be sort of the standard requirements for that. I think specifically, the town wants to be indemnified for events held on town property. I think this inquiry was more for open private events held or public events held on private property, and whether that liability number could be reduced for lower numbers of people. My response to the inquiry was, I think what the town's looking to do is ensure that if it's approving an event, that there's insurance that would reasonably cover an expected incident, and by reducing that, there may be some culpability. And I don't know if
think
that's more of a legal question.
Basically, wouldn't we just check with Maya? They'd be able to tell us.
Well, not really, because to Adam's point, what he's talking about is if somebody has a
If you
public
have a-
event on private
yeah.
property, we wouldn't be the primary person that gets sued, but we could get named, and I'm not sure I want
For not
I want to be
requiring
held
for-
harmless as a town.
Yeah. So, I don't know if that's a legal question that we could or couldn't be held harmless, and if there's a vehicle for which
I think it's
to
worth checking with town council.
alter that.
Is there language, or is there a number, or is there something that can make the town feel comfortable with being?
Right,
Well, we
right.
could put a indemnification clause in there.
Right.
That when they sign the
So that if
permit
they,
application.
so the
that they're
the
holding
liability
town
insurance would be
harmless.
only for the use of town property, and
Right.
and the
Yeah,
the
but even
town-
if we have a clause, I'd like enough coverage to cover our legal expenses,
Yeah, right,
because people sue everybody when something happens.
right. Yeah, so check with town council, maybe Maya, just, we need to be covered
All right.
for sure.
You got what you need?
I did.
Good. And then we will take that next version and schedule.
Yeah, so I'll get
schedule a
that out
public
to
hearing.
you by the end of the week.
Great.
Thank you much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Adam.
Mr. Chair, you willing to take a brief public comment to add to that?
We're going to have a public hearing.
I know, but I think it should be dealt with before the public hearing.
Please.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. First of all, I applaud this being brought forward. This is something I've been pushing for a couple of years now. First of all, I think this criteria should be kept in place for all events, including the ones you were talking about excluding. That was one of my big gripes about the way we were handling special permits before. Some just flew by without almost not even hearing and being vetted by individual departments. So I feel they should all go through this process. And like you say, maybe we'll find down the road that we want to change that, but I think initially they should all go into that. The other thing that I would like to bring up is that on page 2, the paragraph that deals with tents and sleeping trailers, I had caught the tent thing, and I knew the intent was for the commercial size tents to protect the town against liability, or whoever against liability, and that I think that's required under state regs, if I'm not mistaken. I do have a very serious question about the sleeping trailers. First of all, what's the criteria for the permits? And the way this is worded, a trailer owner is going to need 3 permits from 3 different departments, and you're going to add a fee to each one of those permits at some point. Number 1, you don't identify what the criteria are for those permits. Number 2, you're committing the Board of Health of Lunenburg, which is not Neshoba board, that is the local elected board. And this is the first I've seen this today. So it didn't go before our board. Maybe somebody in the office did review it, but I wasn't aware of it. So I think and are you going to have 3 people there paid on the weekends to check all these trailers in and hand them permits? I mean, potentially some of these trailers are going to be coming from out of state. Those are my comments. Thank you.
All righty. Town manager report.
So first item in my report is an announcement. The DPW director had submitted an application to Mass DOT's Municipal Small Bridge Program to reconstruct the Pleasant Street Bridge over Pearl Hill Brook back in June of 2017. Since then, the director, the engineer, our state legislators, and I have all been in contact with Mass DOT representatives to find out the status of the application and advocate for its approval. The DPW director recently received notification from Mass DOT that the application has been approved for $379,000. I applaud the DPW director for going after funding for this structurally deficient bridge that is an important emergency route for our public safety responders to all the residents of Pleasant Street. This grant equates to $379,000 less in local taxpayer dollars and avails the town to spend this on other necessary capital projects. As the timeline of this project becomes known, there will be more information made available to the public, including detour routes. As with any detour, there will be some inconveniences, but the reconstruction of this bridge is vital to the public's safety. I'm going to skip over the additions to the fiscal 20 budget priorities because that's an agenda topic later on. The permanent guidebook, the land use director uploaded the digitized version of the permanent guidebook onto the website under the planning board's page. The permanent guidebook was created to assist customers with the process in obtaining a permit or a license in an easy to comprehend guidebook. There's a notice with the updated Citizens Town Caucus showing the 3rd planning board seat. Pay-as-you-throw bag complaints. Chairman Toll forwarded me a complaint from a resident recently about a quality of the pay-as-you-throw bags, which was given to the bag vendor, Waste Zero, to both document the complaint and is necessary for them to know which production run generated faulty bags, and faulty bags will be replaced by Waste Zero by sending a replacement sleeve. For anyone that experiences faulty bags, please contact Waste Zero customer service at 1-800-866-3954 and provide the 5 to 7 digit code stamped on the bag.
So each bag has a code?
It does, and that indicates to production run.
Okay, thanks.
Senior Work-Off Program Regulations. The Senior Work-Off Committee discussed at their last meeting the possible proposal to amend the current regulations that determine a senior's eligibility to participate in the Senior Work-Off Program. Selectman Luck had brought up at a previous Selectmen's meeting she learned at the MMA conference of a town that allows an approved representative to work on behalf of a disabled senior. The Senior Work-Off Committee and I are currently researching the mechanics of how that would work, including who would file the W-4 and if another town meeting vote is required, since the town initially approved this law in May of 2000, when that provision of the law did not apply. The Senior Work-Off Committee will also look at changing the income requirements and increasing the hourly rate as allowed under the relevant Mass General law. The committee meets later this month. Contract review process and centralization of procurement files. In order to streamline the process for procurement and the engagement of services that they have gone through all the proper procedures, departments were notified of a few changes that took effect immediately. Any department that contracts out for services, software, or other projects, we're told that those contracts will need to be reviewed and signed off by the town manager and a copy given to the finance director prior to engaging with a vendor contractor. Also, our auditing firm has denoted in our last 2 management letters that the town's supporting documentation for procurements, which are bids, quotes, and contracts, are being kept by individual departments instead of a centralized location. As the chief procurement officer, the logical centralized location for these files is in the town manager's office. Departments were told that all files related to procurement of goods and services, building projects, design services, and public works projects will now be provided to the town manager's office.
Will they need to be provided electronically or in paper form?
Either is fine. Yeah. Walkability and parking study. Montechusett Regional Planning Commission will be commencing the walkability and parking study shortly. This will include speaking to the various stakeholders. I'll update you as that progresses. Fiscal year 2020, active employee health insurance rates and other optional benefit changes. We received terrific news last week from our insurance company, Maya, on the rate renewals for active employee health insurance for fiscal year 2020. At the beginning of the budget process, we were told by Maya to estimate an 8% increase in health insurance for fiscal 20, and this past month, Maya released their rate ranges with a maximum increase of 5%. We received our actual renewal rates, and it will be a decrease of 2.45% for fiscal 20. To receive a decrease in our annual renewal is unprecedented, and this equates to roughly a $60,000 decrease from my preliminary budget recommendation that had a 5% increase for health insurance. This will also positively impact the school budget, and the reduction in rates is attributable to the surplus that the Maya Trust has redistributed to its member communities. Another benefit of the insurance trust is that large loss claims get pulled out and the cost gets spread across the trust members.
Now, I have a question. It talks about active employees. What about retired employees?
Those rates are not out until January of next year. They're in a calendar year.
That's inconvenient.
Changes to employee optional insurance coverages. Our health insurance consultant, the payroll benefits coordinator, our new optional insurance broker through Boston Mutual, and I met with the Public Employee Committee in February, and we'll be offering an improved voluntary term life insurance, new accident insurance, and enhanced coverage for short and long-term disability for benefited employees. The changes will provide employees with more coverage for less money. As these are optional, employees will have a choice to enroll or continue coverage during the open enrollment period in May. Just to save the date notice, the Dementia Friendly Action Group has finalized their kickoff event, which will be Monday, May 20th at 6 p.m. in the Lunenburg Library. And this will be inviting obviously the public, town officials, our legislators, and invitation to the governor's office as well, Mass Council on Aging, and the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. Community solar. As a follow-up to our conversation about Nexamp's community solar available to Lunenburg residents, the project at Northfield Road is the only community solar project owned by Nexamp in Lunenburg. But there is also a community solar project in Fitchburg that is open to both Fitchburg and Lunenburg residents. Both projects have plenty of availability for residents to sign up for discounted electricity. I have a call with Nexamp this week to discuss putting a joint promotional mailer to increase awareness about the program. Some updates from the last department head meeting. The DPW, the Summer Street Road Reconstruction Project is ahead of schedule, and the installed posts, which there's been a lot of questions about those, are federal and state standard requirements for signage. There will be 2 large culvert projects that will begin after school gets out on Sunset Lane and Northfield Road. Once the winter season ends, the DPW will continue the pavement management plan, and we'll be doing about $1 million to $1.8 million in paving from spring until fall. And just to note the long hours that the DPW workers have been working this season, so thank you to all of them for keeping our roads clear.
Yeah, the roads have looked really good.
The finance director is in the process of finalizing the ClearGov data, and once all the fiscal 20 budget data is inputted, then the department heads will receive a training on how they will submit their budgets next year for fiscal 21. The Council on Aging has a number of events coming up, including Ted Reinstein, a reporter for Chronicle, on Monday, May 6th at 7 p.m., the St. Patrick's Luncheon on Friday, March 8th at noon, dementia-friendly kickoff on Monday, May 20th at 6 p.m. at the library. The cable, a new monitor will be installed in the corner, in that corner over there, next to for the people at home at the right side of the stage, so viewers in the audience can look forward for presentations instead of back. Will be more convenient. So, and also the wireless microphones will be back in working condition. They had to fix the transmitter that was associated with that. The treasurer collector motor vehicle excise bills have been sent out and are due on March 25th. The treasurer is planning on doing another tax lien sale. An updated list will be sent out well in advance to all the relevant committees and boards to review. The land use, the planning board held their public hearing on adult use recreational marijuana on February 25th, and their meeting was last night, which they approved the regulations, I'm told. And the planning board will be also reviewing the parking bylaw shortly. The library board of trustees conducted interviews and appointed Muir Hammond to replace Martha Moore as the next library director upon her retirement at the end of the month. Some upcoming meetings. Charter Review is holding their second public hearing tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. in this meeting room. Finance Committee has budget meetings with the Sewer Commission and Monty Tech this Thursday at 7 p.m. in this meeting room. And I will be attending a MMPA, which is Mass Municipal Personnel Association meeting this Thursday. That's all
Mr. Chair, I have one question. In the employee optional insurance, is there any cost to the town?
No.
Thank you.
100% borne by the employees.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the town manager report? Okay. Under current business, discussion of the town manager evaluation process and timeline. I sent a copy of last year's town manager review form to each of you this afternoon. Didn't expect that you had a chance to look at it in detail, but that was the form we used last year. I intend to use it this year. In terms of a timeline, there are certain items that we need to put some dates on. I'd like the town manager to give us a copy of her, we should all have this, but a copy of her previous year goals. Ask the town manager to begin to think about completing a self-evaluation. Each selectman should schedule a meeting with the town manager and begin to complete the review form. All of this begins after the April 15th start of the review process calendar.
So kind of the first thing we need is the narrative self-evaluation, wouldn't you think?
They can happen concurrently, but it could be helpful to get that first.
Right.
What we want to do is put dates on all these things, probably at our next meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
I have a question, though. I thought that under policy and purpose, the second paragraph, I thought there was an issue about that being in violation of open meeting law.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So the process says that each selectman will give a copy of their input to the chair. The chair will do a composite of those without discussion with any of the individual members. And then the BOS reviews that composite at a public meeting. And that is the response to the open meeting concern, that we deliberate in any fashion other than the open meeting. It is okay for one person to coordinate the composite of those and to bring that document to a public meeting. So we'll have to schedule a meeting where that composite of each of our inputs, and that's the only document that we discuss in public. The individual documents that each of you complete go to the, as opposed to being input, in addition to being input to the composite, they go to the town manager and they're part of the town manager's personnel record, but they're not public documents.
So the issue last year was that we saw each other's.
No, the issue was that we had them ahead of time, and the input from everybody was considered deliberation, and it was done not in a public forum. So in this case, the input would come all together with a composite. The only person that would see it is the person that puts the composite together, which is myself, and then we'll all see it for the first time at a public meeting.
So at a public meeting, we'll see your composite.
Right.
Will we see everyone else's evaluations at that meeting?
Don't believe so, no.
Will we see those at a later date?
It's something we should talk about at our next meeting, but
No, 'cause then they'd be public
they then become public records. And the rationale being that they are part of the town manager's personnel record, but they're not in and of themselves public records.
Okay, so I know that we all received each other's last year.
Yeah, and that was part of the issue with that being perceived, not just us, but across the Commonwealth, that being perceived as a problem from an open meeting point of view.
One issue that I had last year, because I saw everybody, is that people were allowed to put exceeds expectations without having any examples. And to me, that's inappropriate. If you want to say meets expectations and you don't provide any examples, fine. But if you're saying they need improvement or they exceed expectations, I think it's imperative that it be stated why.
That's good input. I can't, I don't think that any of us have the ability to force any of the rest of us to do that.
Well, I think you do. I think it can be part of the form that, you can't.
It's part of the form, but I mean, I don't know how you enforce that. You're asked to give an evaluation. I think a good evaluation is one that you share with the town manager so that he or she understands your perception of performance and results against goals. And I personally would provide as much narrative as I could to support that. But if somebody's not going to do that, I'm not sure how I make them do it, or how any of us would make each other do it.
And just give it, I don't know. I just think it's inappropriate.
Don't disagree. So then finally, they all come together at a public meeting. We discuss it in a public session. If there's any, editing as a result of that public meeting, we could do that edit, and then it becomes part of the the record, and I would recommend that we then, after the whole process is over, have a workshop to develop, next year's town meeting, town manager goals and BOS goals as a result of that. So the
You know,
time.
another thing is that I felt last year that my input was not represented equally. When the composite, I felt that there wasn't much of my input in the composite. So I'd like to know how that can be addressed if I feel that way again.
Without it being a numerical exercise, I mean, each of our inputs is 1/5, or in our case this year, 1/4
Right.
of the input.
Uh-huh.
We agreed 2 years ago to move away from making it a mathematical exercise and to make it more of a, narrative exercise. I would guess that your comment is a criticism of the way I compiled it, and I'm perfectly
I
open.
guess.
I'm perfectly open to discuss that.
So Phyllis, do you feel like it would have been better if it had been more mathematical so that your input would have had a same weight as
Yeah, no, I don't
Anybody
know. I
else's?
just didn't feel represented in the evaluation. So I'm not sure how to correct that.
I think an evaluation where it's looking for input from a certain number of people should be weighted in a mathematical way so that everybody has equal input on the process.
Well,
And I remember watching it last year, so I remember the content and the conversations being on the other side of it. But I certainly think if there's a certain group of people evaluating somebody, then everybody's input should be worth the same amount.
and that's true, but if you're one person who felt one way and the other 4 people don't disagree with you, then you're still only 20%
But at least you'd
of the
feel like your
summary.
20% was represented. If it was mathematically speaking, it would be easier to document the way you felt.
And this year, I won't have any idea what the other 3 people last
I guess
year.
you don't want it to be subjective to the
Exactly.
point that you want it to be more
I
concrete.
mean, in last year, we were able to see everybody else's report, so I was able to judge.
Again,
What
if the other 4 people gave the manager 100 and you gave him a 0, the score would still only drop to an 80 and it'd still be a pretty good, it'd still come out sounding like a good review. So you can't ward it and say 4 people thought you did a great job and then 1 person didn't agree with them.
And remember, the whole process and the form that we decided to use and the movement to a 3, meets expectations, exceeds expectation, does meet expectation, that whole process was agreed to by a 5-person board 2 years ago at the beginning of a cycle. And certainly it's something that this board could review at the beginning of the next cycle. But this cycle, we started with the form that we have and
Have we begun yet, though?
yeah, but the year's coming to an end. We're reviewing the performance for the past year.
I mean, the performance review is just beginning.
Right.
So would you like to make a motion, Phyllis, that we design it differently?
But
I
Heather's
don't
known
know
about
that-
the criteria that
Right.
she's supposed
Right.
to be
I don't know.
performing to.
I don't know that
I
we
think
can
it's
do
in my
it.
contract.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
the
we-
form, and we could certainly make this, we are running late tonight, and I don't want to give this a short shrift. So we can make an agenda item and talk about it. But the point of the matter is, as a result of the town manager's contract and tradition over the last several years, the process, the form, and the expectation for review has been in place. So we can discuss it, but I would not be in favor of changing it, other than changing it going forward
Right.
with the agreement of the participants of the contract, like any other contract you have.
You have to change it at the beginning of her performance cycle. She knows
Yep,
what
yep.
standards to adhere to.
We aren't
Within the
really-
agreements that
we're
already,
not really talking about changing the performance standards, we're just talking about how they would be scored.
right. But we had this conversation at length with another board and made a decision. All right? So if we want to have that discussion again, that's fine, but it's for a
Right.
future.
Right.
Right.
So for the beginning, I understand that it's too late for this cycle. But I was under the impression that we all got to see each other's reviews, at least at that meeting.
Well, I think open meeting law strikes again. I mean,
Right. All right, so we'll have to,
So we're not going to publicly discuss the reviews?
Well, we're going to discuss a composite review.
Why can't we just discuss each individual person's review?
during that discussion, we probably could, because we'll have them in front of us.
No, then there be public record. I think
Yeah.
legal needs to be consulted about.
Yeah, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's make this an agenda item. We have until April 15th to start the actual writing and meeting process. So let's make it in the next meeting or two to make it a topic and get specific input from town council in terms of what open, there's two things working here. One is what we've agreed to at the beginning of a review cycle as a board. The other is what's possible under the guidelines of open meeting law. And there has been input and change relative to the way we did it last year that's impacted by open meeting law. So let me get input from town council and employment council, actually, so that we have a clear understanding of
Right.
what we can and can't do.
Yeah, right, I don't want to do anything
And then,
we can't
and then
do.
we'll have but my objective is to put a time frame on this so that we in fact do all these things, that if we get snowed out or something else, we still get to a point where this board does a review cycle that we've agreed on and delivered prior to the election where the board changes. Okay?
Yep. And I would really think that the self-evaluation of the town manager would be the first thing that we should have in order to complete our evaluations.
Okay, let's talk about it. Let's get that on I'd like to get it on next week's agenda, but I haven't reviewed what else we have to do yet. We'll get it on next week's or the soonest one we can to have that discussion. All right?
Great.
Alrighty. Current business number 2, filing of a demolition delay permit for the old primary school building. Now, we do have some new information, right, or not much?
Not much.
Okay.
So this was an action item after the last meeting. The board wanted to proceed with filing a demolition delay permit
Right.
for the old primary school building. One question that I have out to town council right now, we just got the Attorney General's approval of the special town meeting warrant articles. So whether that takes
The
effect.
annual town meeting?
Special town meeting. which-
Last year's special town meeting
Oh,
changed the demolition
Okay,
delay
all right.
policy,
Now I
and we're trying to get an understanding from council what impact that has on us.
Right, but Adam can correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that the demolition delay bylaw doesn't apply to the APDC, and it gives APDC the unequivocal ability to say no forever. And he's giving me the thumbs up.
Yeah, that is
So,
true.
There's no demo delay to file for. There's a demo permit to file for, to say we want to knock it down, and they will, I assume, just say no, and that's that. Unless you prove to them that you tried to do something with it and there's no other out.
So there's no reason to get the clock started, is what you're saying?
There's no clock. You have to show them that you tried, or go and have them say no. You can do that to make it official.
I think that was a recommendation to just seek to get the ball rolling on what the conversation
but-
would become.
My point is, there's no clock. So you're,
It's not a demolition delay
So
situation.
let me just be clear, because I don't know this. So what we're saying then is if the APDC said you could knock it down, you wouldn't have a clock at that point. Is that true?
Probably going to regret getting up and sticking my nose in this, but the way that the APD bylaw reads, the APDC in the Architectural Preservation District takes the power of the demo delay from the Historical Commission, but they reserve the right to permanently deny demolition. So in theory, they could give you demo delay on a contributing structure. I'm going to make an inference from sitting in the audience when you had your meeting with them that they're not going to do that. and that the likelihood of them just saying no without, as Mr. McQuaid said, you demonstrably proving to them that either, and I actually went on a walk that did that. I saw a structural engineer stick a pen through a 12-inch wood beam, and this was a local historic district. They said, "Oh, I think we can tear this building down." So unless you can prove something like that, I expect you're up for an uphill climb.
What you just said is exactly the way I had understood that inference, and also what they had said at our meetings. My only question is, if perchance they decide that we have made that demonstration, and yes, in fact, they approve a demolition.
Yep.
Is there any reason to have a clock started in any way? Does that then come to play, or is that totally out of the picture?
No, because even outside of the APDC, the Historic Commission could say to someone, "We're not going to require you to do demo delay." So the purpose of demo delay is to
show that you've done all those things.
To force someone into attempting to do those things over a period of time.
Totally understood. But I want to be totally clear on this. Does the Historical Commission have the ability to enforce a delay in time?
The APDC would within the Architectural Preservation District. The Historic Commission won't play any role. Well, I shouldn't say they won't play any role. They would not be the approving
So
authority.
there's no reason to get the clock started. We're dealing with the APDC.
Correct.
Okay.
And
that's what
they
this
could hit you
discussion
with the
is all about.
clock, but I don't necessarily think that that's the direction they would be moving. I think it's going to be a yay or nay based on demonstrable condition of the building and future reuse.
Okay.
So is there any harm in asking them, or just no point?
The harm would be them saying, "No, you can't ever demolish it," and then having that as a recorded decision.
One of our agenda items is to begin to talk about warrant articles with regard to that property, so that we can begin to demonstrate that we're starting to do everything possible.
I mean, we could go to them and say, "What's it going to take for us to demonstrate this to you?" But you're not starting any clock. Maybe you're starting a conversation, but
Okay. Okay, well, so we still have work to do down in the warrant article place, but I think we got our answer on that particular one. The third item under current business is the update on the feasibility study for the Regional Animal Control Building. And we do have some input on that.
Yes. So in your packet is the product of the feasibility and architectural design that was part of a grant we received through the Efficiency and Regionalization Grant under the Community Compact Program. The grant amount was around $42,000 to conduct this study and design. So the project was looked at a regional approach for animal control with the town of Townsend. We put out an RFP in March of 2018, which was awarded to Roy S. Brown Architects in May of 2018. And from that point, the architect met with the Chief Marino, the Townsend Police Chief, the Townsend Animal Control Officer, and our Animal Control Officer, Kathy Como. And again, with the two ACOs to perform a necessary space needs of what was required and what they needed for based on the, sorry, oop. Quiet phone. Based on our needs of how many animals we take in a year and so forth. So the site identified as the best site was the land behind the public safety building, which has its own challenges. And one challenge came up, we needed to perform a geotechnical, hired geotechnical engineer to do site borings because there's some ledge back there. So that was part of the design that you'll see in your packet. So I want to bring to you, give you an update, and Chief Marino here is as well. The price tag, based on the design, is 1.6 million. And this is obviously prevailing wages project, and meets all the space needs of both Townsend and Lunenburg. But I can't, with clear conscience, recommend this to voters, given all of our other needs for other buildings, to proceed with in this manner of constructing a building of that magnitude for that dollar amount. So what we wanted to
Is that our portion, or is that the whole
no,
price?
that's the cost of the building. Yeah.
So would we be responsible for half?
That's if Townsend even wanted to proceed any further with it, which I'm not sure they would, because they had the same reaction as we did about the cost.
In terms of it being set up for the space to be regionalized, was it scaled down as a project if it were just Lunenburg's facility and it was smaller?
That wasn't part of the grant, because it was a regional grant application, so that's not something we looked at.
So we have one data point. We have a $1.6 million data point. What we don't know is, can we share that expense with Townsend? What we don't know is, are there any revenue sides to this? I mean, I don't know if animal control has a
revenue generating source. Potentially, if we were to build it ourselves and we in a town was looking to outsource space needs, but it's not going to pay for a $1.6 million building. What the chief and I wanted to propose as a possible something to explore is the property in front of the public safety building is for sale.
Oh.
And if we could purchase that land, utilize that building, because right now our animal control is housing all the animals at her private residence. We're not going to be that fortunate to be in that scenario forever, and it's going to be a cost to the town. So what?
And what's the price of that property?
I don't know if we have a final figure. The chief has reached out to the owner of the property, though. $700,000. It would also, and this was something the chief, when I first came to town, he was like, this would be prime location to buy, because it also would provide a second means of egress. Right now, there's no second means of egress.
Oh, yeah, no, it would be perfect to have that piece.
You'll spruce it up a little, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it wasn't nothing.
Yeah.
No, it was just off the cuff. It wasn't anything like we need to get this building, and I don't want to misrepresent that.
Well, I think the fact that the current animal control officers associated with the facility is definitely long-term extremely risky, and being very proactive about the solution right now, I think makes sense, because it's just all of a sudden going to show up one day, and there's going to be no way to manage animals. So.
So if we did, say, go down the road and were able to get that piece of property, would you still consider doing it regionally then?
We'd have to look at the building itself and see what we could house there, and potentially.
There's two buildings, right? Isn't there a house?
Garage and
Isn't there a
house?
the house and the marina? Well, marina, boat shop.
Jim, use the microphone, Jim, please, just for the folks at home. Thank you.
There's a two-car garage, there's a house, there's some kind of shed-type dormer structure on the back of the house.
And the business, or are you calling that the shed?
No, the two-car garage was the business.
Oh, okay.
That's where the boats were repaired.
Are these facilities noisy? Or do they generate?
Barking?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the design of the building, there's provisions to keep the dogs quiet, but during the daytime hours, obviously, there's times when they'd have to be out in outside of the building, because the
Not a
building.
lot of abutters, maybe across the street.
No,
a
that's
few
why,
and whatnot.
there's not a lot of abutters, and that's why we proposed it, or one of the reasons we proposed to do it behind the police station, that, because that whole, that piece of property is, a reasonable distance away from any home. But the noise would probably, if there was any, would be during the daytime hours. Dogs would be put in crates at night inside the building. But without going into too much detail about Kathy and so on and so forth, keep in mind, she's been trying
yes,
to retire
right.
for a couple of years. But she does this out of the goodness of her heart.
Yeah, she does.
And she would probably do it till the day she dies, but, we gotta start looking at addressing
And
this
something
problem.
about if you took that piece of property in front of public safety and you turned it into this, it wouldn't be a gigantic investment, and you could, use it for a while, and if it didn't work out, you could go to Plan B.
That's exactly the way I
But you
propose.
have that piece of property saved.
That's exactly the way I propose it to the town manager.
Oh.
Exactly. Let's take control of it.
Yep.
We can knock down some of it and just use the house, and, we could adapt that fairly easily into a facility to house dogs for now. And, it's a good investment, I think, for the town. You're never gonna lose money on it. And then in the future, it gives us some breathing room. In the future, we move it somewhere else, maybe use the land for something else. But the other point was, or the other aspect of that is, and Heather alluded to it, was we have only one form of egress, and that's not a real safe situation for us.
I agree.
So that would definitely give us the land immediately to make another driveway, so.
The aesthetics of your whole facility would go way, way
Well,
up.
yeah, that's,
You can take down some of the dilapidated fence and throw some grass and a flagpole, so.
Yeah, that's
And a few
another-
dogs.
That's another point.
I think this is a big, I certainly understand our situation with Kathy and not having a real good contingency plan, and this might be a great opportunity. But, we just spent a fairly large amount of money to have a feasibility study, came in with a number that was choking, in terms of how high we thought it was. We're not sure what the other town thinks of it. We do know that there's a piece of property that's available. We already have 5 pieces of property that are surplus. I think we're not going to make this decision tonight. I would suggest that we make this a big agenda item, if not a workshop. Get the right people and the right background together and do this right.
Right. Even if you get that for 700, with prevailing wage and cleaning it up, and you're gonna be into it for $1 million. I understand we can sell it if we want to go down that route in the future, but
Yeah, but we're not going to make that decision at a meeting like this with no data other than.
I'm just saying, I'm daunted by the number either way.
Yeah, I am too.
If I can,
Go ahead.
just, is the West Street property. It's moving forward to sell that piece. The cost could be offset by the sale of that property. So that's
Yeah.
one thing to keep in mind. And purchasing the land with the building doesn't mean we need to put up a new building on the front lot.
Yeah, but you want to clean it up. It probably needs new siding, a new roof. You got to do some reconfiguration inside to make it work.
It might need some improvements, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but it's probably far less than 1.6 million.
Right, and we also have 4 other properties that we may want to put animal control in besides.
And even if the price climbed to the million or something, that piece of land I've thought should be municipal since the building was built. I think that's a huge opportunity. And then to find a reason to make it more viable and usable, I think makes a lot of sense.
That's the conversation we had. Let's get rid of some of this land that's really not valuable to the town. That's a valuable piece of land to the town, I think.
Yep,
I mean, that's-
I hear all the arguments, I really do.
Yeah.
I
I just-
don't think on a very crowded agenda, we're going to make a decision
Yeah,
tonight.
right,
I think we
right.
should make a decision to put this someplace with a group of people that are going to make a good decision.
Right, and this, we're just reporting.
Right, no.
And I agree with you, but I want to keep this conversation going, and that's,
No, I agree. I agree.
thanks.
Thank you, Chief.
Now, do we need to do anything on the 1.6? Do we need to respond to the people that did the study? Do we need to have a meeting with Townsend? Do we need to?
Should at least reach out to Townsend.
We have
because-
reached out to Townsend.
Okay.
Because if they're interested, 800,000 isn't that much considering what we're talking about.
Well, it's more to Townsend than it is to us.
Mm.
They're a smaller community than we
Oh.
are.
And they don't get the land to sell it in the future. Okay, we got some work to do on that one, big time work, I think. All righty.
Real estate business, whether we want to be or not.
And we're not that good at it.
Oh, absolutely. We have minutes from January 22nd and February 5th. We have a letter that we need to sign. This is a formality as a result of the town charter. It's from us to Kathy Herrick, the town clerk. This letter is to notify that the existing vacant seat on the planning board created by David Prokoview's resignation has not been filled by appointment due to lack of applicants. Please place this position on the May 18th, 2019 annual election ballot. The original term for this seat was until 2021. If you have any questions, please contact the office. Can I get a motion to sign that?
I move we assign the notice of vacancy on the planning board.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I have warrants in the, for accounts payable in the amount of $622,084.95. Accounts payable in the amount of $585,204.71. Payroll in the amount of $798,973.32.
That's just
This is the carry-in, the BYOB permit that we approved.
this is the next agenda item.
And our next agenda item is to sign the Council on Aging contract with MART. This has been reviewed
Yes.
by town council and,
Insurance company, yep, everyone.
okay.
Council on Aging Director.
You'll be happy to finally get that.
Now, this
You can,
just requires my signature?
yes.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the transportation service contract between MART and the town of Lunenburg?
I move we give the authority to sign the agreement with Mart.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All righty. Budget priorities.
So this was a follow-up item from our last meeting where there was discussion about fuel tanks and the Finance Committee meeting where a lot of that discussion took place about the capital plan and the fuel tanks discussion. So I also wanted to add to that list based on a meeting that we had with Rep. Benson and Rep. Hay. And
Add to what list?
to the fiscal 20 budget priorities that we were discussing to submit to the state,
Uh-huh.
just as far as discussion purposes. So the superintendent and Chief Marino discussed the need for additional security infrastructure at the schools, including bidirectional amplifiers at Turkey Hill Elementary and the primary. Chief Sullivan had highlighted the need for self-contained breathing apparatus, which is on the capital plan. And the DPW director spoke about the need to address the intersection near Turkey Hill Elementary School and Northfield Road. And as always, we advocated for more Chapter 70, Chapter 90, and unrestricted general government aid.
What does the DPW director recommend at that intersection?
Just funding. I think that's what he all these relate
Okay,
to.
because the engineer talks
funding.
about getting rid of the triangle, but I keep saying that with drop-off and pickup, that triangle is essential to reroute people.
That would
And
have
and
to
it's-
still go through a
the
design
triangle went
process.
away, you would end up with a lot of turnaround on Turkey Hill, or more people turning onto Mass Ave at Northfield, which I find an uncomfortable turn.
And to me, I don't want to request for money without, this is what we're going to do with it.
I would be very sad to see that triangle go away. I know there's lots of reasons they're removed from different intersections, but if you study what happens at Oak Ave twice a day, that triangle is used to route a lot of traffic back in a direction that I don't know where all that traffic goes. So I don't understand why that keeps coming up without a real understanding of how valuable that turnaround kind of is.
For people to make an illegal turn on a triangle?
I don't know if it's really an illegal turn.
And,
Is it illegal to turn on the triangle?
To turn triangle into a circle?
You're like, and then you take a left, and then you take a left. I've never felt like I was breaking the law.
I feel like there has to be some big improvements to the capital planning process. I feel like the $220,000 for the installation of new fuel tanks, I listened to that February 14th hearing, and the only items clear in that presentation was pulling the old tank up and getting rid of the old tank. It totally dissolved into blah, 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 blah after that. I don't understand why capital planning approved this expense with no backup information and no understanding of what the alternatives might be. I understand that capital planning didn't know about the WEX program, but why isn't the question asked when something comes before capital planning? Are there any alternatives?
Well, I don't think that's fair. I think that the people who are experts on our DPW and our tanks and the fire chief and brought it to capital planning, who spent time reviewing it and compared it with other priorities and made a priority decision of that thing. Then it goes before the budget, and somebody comes up with an opinion that they heard of something in Fitchburg that may or may not work. That's not factual either. And as far as I'm concerned, the quality work was done at capital planning, and if somebody wants to go sit in on capital planning and give some input, that's fine. But I don't think that, I was at that meeting, and I thought that was a waste of an hour and 15 minutes that night at the Finance Committee. And I think it was total conjecture from people that have no expertise.
But the input was not opinion. The fact that Fitchburg uses a different method is a fact. I think
And
it's
the state police uses that same method.
I think it's unfair to call it people's opinions when they were just representing.
No, but we have
alternatives.
experts, emergency management, who gave input that they need fuel available to them 24/7 in conditions that would normally shut down other service stations, and that was not an appropriate alternative. And somebody at a finance committee said, gee, I think it would be a great idea, and we spent an hour and a half talking about it.
But I agree.
Well, if neighboring communities are doing it, I think it's fair for people to discuss
It's not
it.
he wasn't plucking it out of the air. He talked to Cumberland Farms about the generation. There are a lot of good reasons to consider that. Even if you don't consider that, I feel like the information given at that meeting on how the $220,000 may or may not be spent was very lacking. The DPW director actually apologized and said he would send more specific information to the Finance Committee the next day. I asked the DPW director if he would send that information to me today, and I did not receive it. Do you have that information?
I don't.
And there's things like the environmental impact too. So I mean, it's a really large conversation
huge.
that I think is okay to have.
Again, as far as the capital planning process, we have department heads that come to us. They're the experts on fuel tanks and public safety and public works.
But they didn't even give you the financial information. They just gave you give us $220, 20,000, and we'll take
And
care of it.
again, we didn't just say, here you go. Part of the conversation was, should we give them money just for the engineering this year? to get a real solid cost on construction, because obviously it was wrong the first time. We had the conversation. We thought it'd be best to expedite the process, give him the money he needs to get it done. If it costs less than that, that's great. But it was an important thing. Again, it's in the Mopus Brook head. You shouldn't have a leaky tank sitting around, so it was a priority to get the process moving. We can only rely on what our department heads, who are our department heads for a reason, give us for information. And we make the best decision we can do on that. Us as just volunteers, I'm an architect. I'm not a public safety or public works guy. Who am I to second guess his day-to-day business when he's the one in there making the recommendation? If someone said, hey, how about the WEX program? We could have gone down that road in November. But it came out in January or February. So that's why it didn't
But
come up before
it's
then.
come out now, and it should be considered.
But that's not something to
Mr.
say against the capital
Mr.
planning
Chair,
process.
if I may comment on part of the capital planning process and our role as selectmen. I think what we're missing when it comes to budget items is that the town is intended to be the legislative branch or the purse strings, like they're going to approve budgets. And I think it's okay from anybody in town and anybody to participate, to look at a budget and question expensive items and look for alternatives. I don't think we want to discourage that. It's important to have our groups here as the executive branch, but the town and anybody participating is certainly should feel welcomed and entitled to brainstorm and give input. I've learned a lot about this topic. There's ways to look at it, and somebody had said one possible way to look at it is to try the alternative, put off installing the fuel tanks for a couple of years, see if the alternative succeeds or not. We maintain the ability to do this project, and it doesn't have to be immediately. The cleanup, yes, but then the studying what other people are doing, I think, is okay. And even if we move forward with this, I really get upset when we belittle the information or attempts of other people to contribute or brainstorm with us.
The
Because I was on the
contributions are fine. I welcome that. But don't say the capital planning committee didn't do their job by not vetting this out in November.
I didn't say that.
The process wasn't bad. We didn't do a bad job. As new information came at the end of the day, and now you're talking about it.
No, I did not say that capital planning
But
did a
that's
bad
what was
job.
said, and that's what I reacted to.
I did not say that.
No, I understand, but that's what was said, and that's what I reacted to.
Okay.
All right,
everybody
and if
always
someone
reacts
has input-
negatively to me, I did not say that.
I'm not speaking negative to anybody.
But you're trying to make it sound like we're not welcoming input. We do welcome
Well, they
input.
called it opinions, and Chairman Toll very much belittled the participation of the
I
person
didn't
who
belittle
brought it.
anything.
Alternative.
Let me just clarify too that in response to that question, the departments, DPW, police, fire have been spending a lot of time researching that program as an alternative, what it looks like as a cost benefit analysis to what we, for our fuel system, and that data will be presented at a future meeting.
Great.
So, but I do agree with the concept. We hire professional department heads to give recommendations, and that's why we hire them, and that's their job.
But did you listen to the?
I was there, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you-
I was there too.
And you felt that explanation of how the $220,000 may be spent was adequate?
I
Yeah,
felt
you know,
that the
if you
fact
felt-
that they didn't dump a plan that was put together by professionals,
There-
because someone made a suggestion.
No, I'm not
They
talk-
agreed to look into it.
I'm not talking about the WEX plan. I'm talking about the presentation of how the $220,000. I'm just trying to assess the way you think about this thing. Did you think that was adequate?
I've been involved in that, the concept of that project, so I knew more than maybe some other people at that meeting.
But
So
why
it
wasn't
made
that, wasn't
understand-
that presented? Why wasn't the more that you know presented?
It was discussed as far as the cost of removal would be around 50,000.
Certainly, that- the
Engineering
cost of
costs would be
removal-
around 80,000. And the remainder of the project is the new construction. And there was discussion about what the tanks would look like, the concerns of public safety. All those items were discussed.
you know, I felt like there was an inadequate presentation of the cost.
Well,
But, you know,
again-
if that's your idea of adequate, that's good for me to know.
No,
That's-
but if
I
you want
find
more, same
that
thing with the
very
building
insulting.
project. Any building project, you need, if you want detailed cost analysis in a line item format, you need to have it engineered. So then you would have to break the project up in 2 years, approve engineering for 1 year, and come back once you know what the estimate is off of that, and then approve a different number later.
It's okay,
So I'm just telling you, if you want more information, you've got to break projects up over a longer period of time.
It's really important, it's interesting for me to know that you thought that was adequate, that's all I'm saying.
It's just how the process
It's-
works for a public building process.
It's a municipal way, I guess, that's,
To answer your question, Phyllis, I think the response to an offhand comment was adequate.
no, I'm not talking about the WEX project at all. I'm talking about.
That's what took the hour and a half.
But what I'm talking about was the very short discussion on how the 220 was going to be spent. I'm watching it, trying to take notes. Go on.
So this is a list of us asking for additional money. And I guess I would, if we need it, make a motion that we add to this list a request to seek funding for the safety items, the bidirectional repeaters, the breathing apparatus. Perhaps I've missed one.
But I actually would like to take things off of the list.
Well, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
And where these items we know we need, I know there was an issue with a student on a bus, and the bidirectional repeater may have helped that. So let's add these things we know we need. Maybe if this one's controversial, somebody can make a motion to remove it, because we're not talking about whether or not it's going to get funded. This list is whether or not we're seeking potential grant help, right?
Earmarks, yes.
So we're just talking about whether or not we're going to seek grant money. We're not going to get grant money for maybe even anything on this list. So what we're talking about now is about asking for grant help. So I would make a motion that we add to this list something as important as the school safety items that were listed. And I guess I would leave it at that. And then if you want to remove one,
Okay.
you know, we can do
Yep.
that.
Okay, great.
So for the grant requests.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Any discussion? I just think that we've talked about these lists. We have people that are the requesters for these lists. We have a role to play in terms of prioritizing these lists. We have to build them into our own capital plan, whether we'd spend the money on them, whether we raised it here, or whether we got it from the state. It's still our tax money.
We may not have to spend that
Well,
money.
that's the point. I mean, that's the activity. It's not just making the list longer. To me, it's the priority of what would we spend, and where we get it from is just a matter of whether it comes out of the local taxes or the state taxes.
No, I'm saying the 220, I think should come out of the capital plan
Also,
entirely.
I think the grants, you go through a process of advocating for them. I think something like school safety and security items, there's usually grants and momentum behind things like that. So in terms of the feasibility of getting a grant or having something that looks attractive to fund, I think the bidirectional repeaters, well, I guess I already made a motion, and we seconded it, so.
I just think that work gets done better by the professionals that do it, and the capital planning committee, and the...
These are all
and-
capital planning items.
And the finance committee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm opposed.
And I'd like to make a motion to remove item 6 from
Was
this
there
list.
3 ayes? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, there was.
Okay. Sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to remove the $220,000 for the installation of new fuel tanks at the Department of Public Works from this grant list of budget priorities for legislators.
I'll second it for the sake of discussion, and to mention once again that this is just a list for asking for grants, and it's not associated with whether or not it's actually funded.
But if we got a grant for it, they'd certainly want to fund it.
Well, it's
So
for
it's
the
second.
town meeting now to fund it. It's on the capital plan.
But it can be removed from the capital plan. We're in the budget process.
Yeah, but this isn't the place to remove it from the
I
capital
think
plan.
Phyllis is concerned if we got the grant for it, it would happen, and maybe.
You know, the thing is,
It's low
the
on the
budget
list, too.
process is very flawed. If we can't be having a discussion on capital items during the budget process,
Right, it should
I
be
keep-
very welcome to
I
have
keep-
these discussions.
saying we have to start this earlier because every year it's the last minute. Oh, you can't take it off now. We've already spent all this time thinking about it. You know, new ideas have come up. There's new information available. We have to be willing to step back and look at new information.
That's what we're doing.
But with a lot of
Right.
negativity towards people's attempt to participate.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed?
Opposed.
I'm opposed. So that one doesn't pass. I'm sensitive to the time, and we do have an executive session with guests here. I'm going to suggest we postpone the town meeting articles till next week. We will have to take them up next week so that we can make the close of the warrant.
Let's
But-
put them on quicker. Sure, put them higher up on the list.
Yeah, very, very definitely. Do we have to make the decision on
No,
281?
that can wait.
That can wait?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to entertain a motion to go into executive session. Before I do that, is there any public comment from the public, please?
I was here till
Yeah,
What was it?
10:48 last night.
10:48 last night or something like that.
Planning?
Yes. Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. Going back to current business and items number 2, just very quickly, a quick comment. Excuse me, I'd like to take 3 first. Just a very offhanded comment, and that is that, the discussion about the fuel tanks and stuff, if the animal control building is not located behind the public safety building, I personally think that's a much safer place to put the tanks. You're away from your water hazards, so on and so forth. So I hope that's considered, because that is something else that's kind of come into the mix now. I'll leave it at that. Item number 2, the filing of the demolition delay permit or a demolition permit, period, I think still should go forward. How much can it cost to fill out the paperwork, to hand it to the APDC and/or the Historic Commission and get that piece rolling simultaneously to everything else you're working on? I don't see that as a big deal. APDC and the land use director agreed with me as he was leaving. The APDC could still throw the demolition delay at you if they chose to. So if you proactively push that process now, at least you've moved into that process simultaneously to everything else you're doing. Just a little note, Heather, can you tell me if the change in the demolition bylaw has been published yet by the town clerk?
I'm not sure.
Has it been certified by the state?
That's what we were discussing.
It has.
The town meeting has been certified. We're trying to get a ruling on when that makes it applicable.
My understanding from...
Well, we're trying to get that from town council.
Okay, my understanding is that the question I just asked, if it's been published by the town clerk. If it hasn't, it has not taken effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment from the board? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to enter into executive session and to adjourn the meeting after exiting executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, Reason Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body as declared by the chair.
So moved.
Relative to the police department. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Mrs. Adams?
Aye.
Mrs. Luck?
Aye.
Mr. McQuaid?
Aye.
And I for myself. Good night, everybody.